dad is coming home.
Bringing vengeance.
Bringing it all.
It's Des, it's D, and you're listening to It's Really That Deep.
We have takes on everything you're watching. Today we're discussing The Odyssey. The Odyssey is Christopher Nolan's adaptation of Homer's epic, following a non-linear, emotionally intense drama. It follows King Odysseus, who's played by Matt Damon, struggling to return home to Ithaca after the Trojan War. He survives mythical terrors while his wife Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, fends off corrupt suitors at his home. Des, why are we discussing The Odyssey?
It's the biggest movie of the year so far. We always knew it was going to be a big film. I'm a big Nolan head. It stars a lot of actors that we like talking about. It's all everybody is talking about. It's caused a lot of controversy. It deals with a lot of themes we're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
What background did you have of the film going in?
So I had read The Odyssey some time ago, so I'm aware with the story. And then, of course, I think anyone who's been on the internet for the past probably 6 months at this point has probably seen something around the discourse in the lead up to this film regarding casting, regarding the lack of Greeks, regarding all sorts of kind of cultural discussions. So that was really, really annoying. I'm actually really happy that that will be drawing to a close soon, hopefully. What background did you have going in?
I didn't read it in school or anything. It wasn't a big part of the Nigerian syllabus, but I know what it is. I've watched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou since I was a very young kid, which is basically a reimagining of the Odyssey. I was also inundated with non-stop press about the film. So I feel like I knew too much, in fact, going in. I very much was very intentional about how I was going to watch this film immediately I had the opportunity to watch it. To the point at which I went to go and inspect the cinema, where I eventually watched it 2 days before I went to watch it, just to make sure everything was going to be as it needed to be.
Oh my goodness, the dedication.
Yeah, I terrorized the staff in that cinema. I know they're tired of me.
What were you looking for specifically?
Because
it's not the screen stuff, because you can find it online, right?
Necessarily in Lagos. There's only two IMAX screens in all of West Africa. And the second one I didn't even know existed until like a few weeks before this film came out. Okay. And the first one, I'm very suspicious of it. So I wanted to go and explore the second one as an alternative to the main one that everyone goes to in Lagos. And they didn't want me to inspect it, but I told them I wasn't going to leave until I did. So
wow. Okay.
Yes.
So on that note, Des, let's get into it. I'm actually really curious. I suspect I know what's going to happen though.
For context, we do not know what the other person thinks about this film. We don't talk about these until we record. And it's been very difficult for this film in particular because everybody around us is talking about it. So I actually have no idea what you do. I have my suspicions, but I actually don't know for sure.
I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm
really?
I can't be 100% sure. I think I know, but let me ask you directly. So Des, was the Odyssey good, bad, or mid?
It was good with reservations. Was the Odyssey good, bad, or mid?
The Odyssey was mid to good. It was mid with good elements.
You thought it was mid?
I did.
Wow.
I did. Why do you think it was good?
There is a certain level of like technical excellence that Nolan just never drops below for me. And to me, that technical excellence, he even pushed it even further here in the spectacle. I was very entertained when I was watching it. I liked it overall, but Interstellar and The Prestigious crowns are untouched for me easily for Nolan's best films. It was beautiful to watch. It was full of rich detail. Watching it in the IMAX theater I thought it looked good. And I had been very worried about how it was going to look based on the trailer. Also, like, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but like I love Matt Damon. So
there we go. It's adding up now.
So yeah. I like Matt Damon a lot, and I think honestly I like him more as he gets older. I'm so
interesting.
Sorry.
Okay,
I'm so sorry. Tia Tamara meme. And I thought the film opens very strongly.
Wow.
And I liked the Trojan horse sequences. The Athena twist, if you want to call it that, worked on me. I liked all the black people in the film. I liked Elliot Page. I liked Cersei mostly. I like Samantha Norton. So these
Mm-hmm.
are the things I liked, right? And but for the things I didn't love so much, like there was a real problem with the pacing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not going to talk yet about this film as an adaptation, but we'll get into that in a bit. There's a problem with the pacing. I didn't love a lot of the gender stuff that people are praising in the film. And I think there were some people
Mm-hmm.
that were underused. And I think there were some people that were outright questionable or bad. But
Mm-hmm.
but as I sat down with this movie and I need to watch it a second time, I've come to a conclusion that this film is all about Christopher Nolan and it's basically a sequel of
Of course.
Oppenheimer. It's a
Oh,
remake of Oppenheimer.
absolutely.
So um so that's just the lens through which I view this film now. But we'll
Yeah.
get into all of that. You tell me why you think the film is mid.
Right. So I think the film is mid to good overall. As you've alluded to, I think it's technically brilliant, but it's worth pointing out it's not technically perfect, as we'll get into. Essentially, I think the reason why I can't, in good faith, say that it was a good film is because, like many Christopher Nolan movies, it completely fails to hook me emotionally. Even his stronger films, like Interstellar, still didn't quite hit the right note for me. And this one is really not good. And what really annoys me about it is like, what really annoys me about it is the fact that Homer's doing a lot of the heavy lifting here when it comes to the writing, and Christopher Nolan still cannot deliver. That's why I know that there's a serious, serious problem when it comes to the writing, right? Now, to give some credit to Nolan, I think he was very ambitious to even adapt this epic. It's been adapted many times before. It's notoriously difficult to adapt. We had similar conversations earlier on in the year with Wuthering Heights, right? And to his credit, I will say, not only does he manage to adapt roughly loosely the Odyssey, but he also manages to incorporate elements of the Iliad, which is my preferred poem. He also manages to incorporate elements of the Aeneid, which covers the Trojan War, and also he manages to incorporate elements of retellings about Circe, for example. So I have to give credit to that. That wouldn't have been an easy thing to do, and he does manage to basically create a coherent screenplay out of it all. In terms of some other positives, as you said as well, there are some strong performances in here, notably Samantha Morton as Cersei, Robert Pattinson as Antinous, and John Leguizamo as Eumaeus. And I think aside from the other names I'm about to list right now, everyone else did an okay job, but there were two people that really didn't work for me in this film, and they and they are they are John Bernthal. He's the worst part of this film for
John
me.
Bernthal,
He's the
straight out
worst
of
part
New
of the
York
film.
City, straight out of the subway into Sparta.
And I know this one's gonna make you happy. I didn't want to join the Tom Holland hate train, but I think towards the end of the film, he really ruins all of the emotional payoff that we're expecting, and like for me, that was unacceptable. So yeah,
Ruins is crazy.
like listen, I'm not here to take away from the technical brilliance of it. It's a very watchable film. I didn't notice the time. That's another thing worth pointing out. I watched it twice last weekend.
Oh, you've already watched it
um
the second
I've
time.
watched it twice. I didn't notice
Girl.
the time, but I just think this film was mid to good. It could have been great if Christopher Nolan had the balls to incorporate a writer to help him out where he struggles.
We'll get into all of that. Thank you for those very important hot takes. I think we are roughly in the same position.
Yeah,
We
it
are
sounds like
we're,
it.
we're close to the
And I
same
predicted
position.
that.
Really, did
But
you? Because
I did predict it.
I was going back and forth in my head. I was like, because once I saw that this wasn't a loyal adaptation, and I know that you've read the text, I was like, well, that could
Hmm.
go either way with Deep because I know you don't like the text that much. So I was like,
No.
will she be bothered that it's not really a loyal adaptation? But then also because of like the problems this film has with like its emotional storytelling and pacing, I was like, Dee already is very suspicious of Nolan when it comes to stuff like.
I actually have one other positive thing to say now that you said that, actually.
Go
I think
on.
that Nolan, let me give some credit to him for a second. Nolan is radical by taking Western, like the beloved Western masculine hero, and using it to critique masculinity, which is effectively what he's done with this film. Taking the Western
Mm.
image of masculinity itself, the image of pillaging, the image of war, sorry, and then using that to critique the Western world and its views on masculinity and war. I think, you know what, hats off to him. It's just that I wish he incorporated more soul into it. I think that could have made it an
Mm.
like I was ready to be excited and I just wasn't. I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, okay. That's a very interesting take on it. Let's talk about the narrative of the 2 hour, 40 something minutes, The Odyssey. Like, it's not a light watch, it's a dense,
No.
dense film. We're going to analyze the film's narrative as the film presents it to us, and then we will separately talk about this as an adaptation of the poem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is how the Odyssey opens. The Odyssey opens with a bard, Travis Scott.
Travis Scott with his fade.
Travis Scott with a fade and with a tattoo of a garland on the side of his head, like Caesar. Um, so a bard, Travis Scott, tells tales in Ithaca's palace about Odysseus, the king, who is long absent following the Trojan War. We meet his wife, Penelope, who is still there waiting for his return, and his son, Tom Holland's Telemachus, who never really got to meet his father, and he's pining for daddy. um we see that a bunch of suitors have balanced themselves in the house, including Antinous, played by Robert Pattinson. Feel free to correct my Greek pronunciations, D.
Oh, please, I'm the wrong person.
So Antinous is there. They're trying to court Odysseus' wife, Penelope, that's Anne Hathaway, to claim the throne from Odysseus. Only Penelope, Telemachus, and the half-blind Eumaeus, who is played by John Leguizamo, believe that he will return. So Telemachus, eventually he's like, you know what, he needs to go and find out what became of his father. So he plans to head over to go and find Menelaus, played by
Yeah.
Dee's fave John Bernthal, who is the king of Sparta, to find out his father's whereabouts. Antinous learns this from his lover, played by Mia Goth, in a very interesting way, um, who is Penelope's handmaiden Melantho. He then conspires with another suitor, which is Polybus, who I think is Corey Hawkins, to
Yes.
kill Telemachus upon his return and plunder Ithaca. Menelaus and his wife Helen, that's Lupita Nyong'o, are good sis, explain their uncertainty about Odysseus' fate, but they tell Telemachus stories about him.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, we then see the stories, including like the original sacking of Troy. So we see Sinon, who is played by Elliot Page, who poses as a deserter to deceive the Trojans when they first bring the horse, which is hiding, Odysseus, Menelaus, and a bunch of the other Greeks. So they are doing it to deceive the Trojans. The Trojans kill Sinon, but they bring the horse in. And then the Greeks, when they get out of the horse inside the Trojan walls, they open the gates for Menelaus's older brother Agamemnon,
Agamemnon. Agamemnon.
Agamemnon, who everybody
Yes.
has been talking about his aura in this film.
Yes.
Who comes in and they sack Troy and they retrieve Helen. Even I don't think we see them
We
retrieving
don't see
Helen,
that,
do we?
no.
We don't see it.
No.
So then Agamemnon and Menelaus then return home early while the rest of Odysseus and his men go on a longer journey back home. When they go out to go and visit, and they go to an island looking for supplies, this is Odysseus and his men, they see a cyclops who basically entraps them in his cave. They try to escape. They end up blinding the Cyclops Polyphemus, and they escape. But they offend Poseidon in the process, depending on how you read this film, and end up lost at sea. And this is basically Act One. Talk to me about the narrative storytelling of Act One. D.
I'm stunned to hear you say that this film starts off strong.
It does
Like
now.
I'm still struggling. Like the first 20 minutes of the film were boring.
No, when I say starts off strong,
okay.
I'm not talking about 20 minutes. I'm talking about the literal first 10, 15 seconds. Like the
Travis
first
Scott.
few seconds. I thought Travis Scott really worked well. And I thought the first shot of the horse half buried in the sand.
Okay.
And them immediately shooting Sinon into the horse.
All right.
Whilst, Travis Scott is saying the man, the myth, the legend, it immediately like got my energy up to the right page. Like I was locked in from those first few seconds. Wow. They really worked well on me, yeah. And I was ready to hit on Travis Scott.
It didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I loved it. I love the imagery of the Trojan horse. That worked really well for me. But I just think that the first 30 minutes of this film was shocking. I was actually like, there's no way this is the film that people are glazing. I was actually getting pissed. Like,
Really?
I was really getting pissed. And then basically, I think, because the first 30 minutes, that's when we're really learning the backstory. We're learning about Telemachus and how weak he is ultimately. And I think my issue with that first 30 minutes is that there's so much exposition, but again, we didn't get the sense of urgency. In the poem, we understand that, like, this is really urgent. So that was a problem for me. But I think, to the film's defense, I started to properly lock in when we get to the Cyclops. When we finally get to the Cyclops, and we also get to Odysseus himself, I was like, okay, finally, the film's bloody well starting. And then I started to ease into the film. I will say that, like, I started to have issues with Odysseus' storyline at this point because, again, Odysseus doesn't actually remember his home. So again, there's no urgency for him to get home. So I really don't care about why he's going home, right? You don't even remember your home. So why should I care that you're going home? And yeah, so that didn't work for me. But I love the Cyclops scene.
Really?
I love the Polyphemus scene.
I didn't love the Cyclops
You didn't like
scene.
it?
I didn't dislike it, I just didn't love it. It's tied to how I feel about how they treated mysticism, mythology, and gods in general in the film.
I get that,
so
yeah.
It wasn't exclusive to the Cyclops. I just didn't love it. But I do like the fact that it was all done physically. Like, it did feel tangible.
Don't get me wrong, there were some issues in this scene with lighting, by the way. Sometimes it's just too damn dark. I get that it's a cave, but, you know, at times it's like, I literally can't see a damn thing. But what really works for me there is the Cyclops has this really, like, shrieking, like, scream, and they basically use it to create, like, a score, which works really, really well for me. And also, as I'll allude to later as well, I really enjoyed the score for this film. And when the team are escaping, basically, yeah, I enjoyed it. When the crew are escaping, the score really picks up for the first time in a way that was really enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I mean, after I locked in from Travis Scott and Elliot Page and the first sign of the Trojan horse, we then start spending time with Tom Holland, and I was like, because going in, I was already, let's say, highly suspicious of his ability to pull this off. I actually don't think he was that bad. He obviously wasn't the best, and he couldn't keep up with his castmates, but he could have been much, 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 much worse. And I've seen him be much worse. However, it does deflate your energy a bit in that beginning part, which is why I was like, I like the first few seconds, but not necessarily the first act overall that much.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it doesn't feel as thrilling to you because you're just watching this wet rag of a boy. That is the point. But
in his defense, yeah, because I'm seeing a lot of people say that, oh, you know, his performance wasn't good because he just looked like a lost little boy, and I'm like, that's Telemachus. That's what he's supposed to do. So that's actually good critique.
That is what he's supposed to do. And I was just playing Spot the Star in this first act because you see Robert Pattinson, you see John Leguizamo appear, you see Logan Marshall Green. I'd even forgotten Mia Goth was in this movie. I was like, what are you doing here? Like, people were just popping up. So that was kind of cute and fun. But like, I kept on comparing in this first act. I kept on comparing in my head to Denis Villeneuve, his first Dune, because you know in the first Dune, that's where you see the Atreides home in Caladan. Yeah. It's kind of a similar way to where you see, okay, this palace that Odysseus has left behind for his wife and son. It was reminiscent to me of Duke Atreides' palace that he has with his son Paul and his wife Jessica. But like, Denis has a way of capturing scale and epicness in his films that just feels so imposing and dramatic and theatrical and ornate that Nolan has never been interested in doing. Nolan likes to do scale in terms of set pieces and production complexity, but not necessarily in the beauty of like architecture per se or like space in the way Denis does. And it was conspicuous to me in this first act. I was like, I don't think I understand just how wealthy or powerful this family or this house is supposed to be, because I don't really feel like you're capturing it that much. Also, Nolan has never been interested in ornate costumery. That's just how he is. And this is one of those films where in this first act, it really was a problem for me because I was like, again, to me, you're losing some of the storytelling to understand what these characters are supposed to be because of this refusal to show them ornate. Even when we get to Menelaus and his wife, what's Lupita's character called again?
Helen of Troy.
In Helen of Troy in Sparta, I'm like, Lupita should be dripping from head to toe in this scene. Like, I had a problem with stuff. Like, the only character that they make a choice to make them look like a spectacle is Agamemnon. And I know it has something to do with like the male ego and all of that. That's why he looks that way. But to me, I think you've lost something in not showing the richness of how these characters and how these sets are supposed to look. I know that's not what Nolan is interested in, but it took me out of that first act a bit because there's not that much cool, magical fantasy stuff happening otherwise. Right? So this was your chance to draw me in the first act. But yeah,
can
I'm
I
just
be a basic woman? Can I just be a girl for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
The most criminal thing that this film does is make me be mesmerized by Agamemnon. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't. Do you know how much I hated that man?
Once you see a man larger than a certain size, your whole brain just starts short circuiting.
I was shocked.
Are you not ashamed?
I'm very ashamed. Agamemnon, of all people, Agamemnon. When we first see him, basically, and he turns around to meet Odysseus, I was just like, wow. Maybe I've been too judgmental about Agamemnon.
I hope you understand that's Benny Safdie you're talking about.
And that's just crazy to me. But anyway, no, I'm sorry. He was looking fantastic in the film. One other point about Helen as well, because I even forgot to mention that. I don't care for Helen in this film at all.
Oh.
We're going to get into further details with it. But I was genuinely like irritated by the scene with Menelaus and Helen. There was no need to do that. It was diabolical. Yeah.
Let's talk about Act 2. So in Act 2, we're still following Odysseus and his ill-fated men. They end up in an island where the giant Laestrygonians attack them. Then the survivors that are left from this attack, they go and seek refuge on another island with the witch Circe, who ends up turning them into pigs. Odysseus figures it out after he shoots a deer who turns into a human, and then he persuades her to change his men back. Circe is played by Samantha Morton. Circe warns him that to reach Ithaca, Odysseus is going to have to cross Oceanus into the underworld, Hades. Then they go to Hades. In Hades, the shade of Teresis, God, I'm so sorry for these pronunciations, warns Odysseus that he's the only one that's actually going to get back home. We then also see Sinon's shade, played by Elliot Page, who reveals that he was manipulated into taking Antinous's place in the Greek army, and he didn't even know exactly that like the Greeks are going to be hiding in the halls, and they basically used him as like a pawn to die. And he was like, how he would have died for them anyway, so he's very upset. Agamemnon's shade also pops out, making Dee's heart start pounding. Dee, please stand up, get up off the floor, please. He says that his wife Clytemnestra murdered Agamemnon upon his return, and he basically warns Odysseus that don't go there expecting everybody to be happy to see you home, that you should probably go in disguise.
He says you can't trust these hoes out here. He said you can't. That's what he basically
said. He basically quoted a Chris Brown song. Disgraceful. So he says she murdered him upon his return as revenge for sacrificing their daughter to Artemis for fair seas. Then the ghosts of Odysseus' rest of his fallen army then starts chasing them, the survivors, from Hades. They run away. The remaining crew, they get on the boat, and they survive Charybdis, which I think is the whirlpool, Scylla, which is the like mouth monster thing in the rocks, and the sirens, even though their number significantly dwindled from all of this. And in the siren scene, Odysseus tells his men to put wax in their ears so they don't get tempted by the sirens, but he himself is not going to put wax in his own ears, and instead they should like tie him to a pole, and you kind of see him yelling and screaming, but you don't actually hear exactly what the sirens are saying. One of his men does take out the wax though to hear them, and he ends up jumping into the water. Then next they end up on Thrinacia, which is I think the sun god's island or something like that. And Odysseus wants his crew not to kill the cattle of Helios, that's the sun god that are there, but they still do it anyway because they are starving. And in retaliation, basically, storms sink the ship, killing all of the crew. Odysseus is now alone. he washes ashore on Ogygia, which is Calypso's island, and the nymph Calypso is there, who is infatuated with him. She gives him lotus flowers and nurses him. 7 years later, they have a whole conversation about him remembering, kind of basically convinces him to remember why he wants to go and confronts why he hasn't gone this whole time. He builds a makeshift raft and off into the seas he goes. And that's Act 2.
Act 2 is my favorite, but it's still
Oh,
not. Yes, Act 2 is my favorite. It's still not perfect though. So starting off with the Lystragonians, they look like the actual like giants themselves look good, but the single biggest crime, like aside from Agamemnon for me for this film, is the child giant. I could not believe how bad the costume was. It literally looked like something you can buy in, I don't know, Primark on clearance.
this is what
It
I'm
was crinkly.
saying.
I could see. I was like, no, no, no. This is why I can't even like
No,
fully award this film for its technical like capabilities.
but do you know that that costume is still not the worst? The worst costume is Charlize Theron's Christian Dior
Yeah, her net
advert
thing.
costume.
But at least that one kind of makes sense. That she's supposed to be this seductress.
Does
You
it?
know, she's trying to, you know, whatever. But no, that child's one, it literally it snapped me out of the film. It didn't even take me out of the film. It cracked me out of the film. I jumped out of the film. And I was just like, oh, I'm watching a film at that point, you know. I wasn't,
Mm.
and I think that's one of the recurring issues I have with this film as well. It never managed to fully immerse me. Now, the single scene that did fully immerse me is Cersei's scene. It wasn't perfect though, because as we pull up, I immediately clocked that's Scotland. Immediately, I was just like, that's Scotland, right? And it was jarring because like obviously this
Not the
film is supposed to
Highlands.
be in the Mediterranean. It's supposed to be in the Mediterranean, right? And that was a bit jarring. But after that, I was fully at ease. The second the men start hiking up to Cersei and they start seeing the lines, and I clocked that, oh, these are men that she's transitioned before. I was like, fantastic. And I'll be honest, the second we meet Cersei and I see that she's like this afraid woman who's like paranoid, basically, I wasn't in love with it. But as her scene plays out, Samantha Morton just takes over the whole film. It becomes her film at that point. She is the
Mm.
standout performer for me. And she's the one scene where I really felt it. There is another moment that we'll get to in Act 3. But this is the one time I really felt something. Like, this is someone who's really struggling with something, right? And that's terrible because this whole film is a commentary on war and PTSD. So, yeah, but yeah, I loved it. I love the horror elements in there, some brilliant sound editing there when the men are transitioning into pigs. I love her little sassy line when she's like, oh, pigs, go back to your disguise, basically saying that these men are pigs and the human is the disguise, which I really like. So yeah, that was brilliant for me. I will say though, we're going to discuss the poem in depth later, but I do want to mention that I think the siren scene was really underwhelming. I wasn't impressed at all. It was just such a boring interpretation of the text. And even like, you know, you mentioned that we don't get to hear anything. That's fine, but I think there could have been more interesting ways to bring us on Odysseus's journey. And even Matt Damon, I think he's overdoing it a little bit in that scene as well. Like none of it worked for me. So
How
yeah,
dare you?
I think he's overdoing it a little bit. And then of course you have Hades, which again in the poem is my single favorite part of the poem. I love what the underworld represents, right? And again, I found myself a bit underwhelmed. It's not bad. I just wanted a bit more. But again, to call out another good performance in here, we have Elliot Page, who I'll be honest, at the beginning of the film, his performance didn't move me very much. But this scene really did work for me, and I think he becomes a perfect metaphor for how war manipulates young men. It manipulates men who are disenfranchised, maybe they're poor or something, and lies to them to ultimately use them for war. So I think he did a really good job of nailing that.
Kind of like Mad Max Fury Road with the War Boys
Precisely.
as well. Yeah.
Precisely, exactly. And I think if he didn't nail that performance, I wouldn't have really felt anything then apart from the Cersei scene. Yeah, so you have the slaughter of the cattle, which again is a commentary on men and their like infinite desire to consume, which was fine, but that comes straight out of the poem. And the Calypso stuff doesn't work for me at all, but we'll get into that when we talk about gender. Your turn.
Oh,
What did you think about
Charlize.
what did you think about Act 2?
Like, yeah, I think probably on average Act 2 is my favorite just because it's the most like fantasy, it's the most craziness, the most action. And that's why we really spend some time with Odysseus. And yeah, I have a thing for Matt Damon. I
Mm-hmm.
actually still wasn't loving like the characterization of Odysseus for like about half of Act 2. But then from once they get to Cersei's island onwards, I was very much locked in
Okay.
because the scene with Cersei when he's trying to figure out what she's done, where the men are, and she tells him that I know you have a dagger, and she's about to grab the dagger, and then at the same time he realizes she's about to take the dagger. He realizes she has probably transformed his men. He realizes all the animals here are people. He realizes the crow is or raven or whatever is important to her. And then he realizes that's what he needs to use as leverage against, and he makes that calculation in a split
Immediate.
second.
Okay.
And then he just reaches out his hand to grab it, and that's how they're both like kind of doing this like balanced threat against each other. She has the dagger, he has the crow by the neck. There was something about that scene that was the first time I was seeing Odysseus' cunning demonstrated properly, and that's
Very
when
good point.
First properly kind of was enjoying the characterization as Odysseus, because up to this point, and even still after this point, it's all very self-pitying. So I really liked that moment. I love Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and in that adaptation of the Odyssey, Odysseus is cunning, leading a bunch of idiots. So
Yes,
and I enjoy that kind of storytelling, and like many people, I also really liked Samantha Morton's performance. There is something about the writing of Cersei that still doesn't exactly work for me.
Okay.
I will get into it more, but I understand why people like the scene a lot. And I like the fact that they cast like a more grown woman for that role, not just like the usual young, sexy siren goddess characters. I mean, still very, very much a beautiful woman, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so from that moment on, I was really enjoying Odysseus a lot more. Unlike you, hater, I really, really liked Matt Damon's performance in the siren scene. All the tussling back and forth he was having with the character that Himesh Patel plays,
Euryclus.
Yes, Euryclus. I was enjoying it, even though I wanted that character to be more fleshed out. Yes, I enjoyed all of that kind of stuff. Some of the sequences, like with Scylla and stuff, were clearly too rushed, but I still enjoyed getting to them. And then we get to Calypso. Charlize Theron, a mess, a fiasco. And it's so sad because I'm actually a Charlize Theron apologist solely because of Mad Max Fury Road. And I believe her Furiosa and Mad Max Fury Road is one of the most important pieces of feminist performance of like action films of the last 20 years. So I'm usually the one ready to defend that South African white woman. But she'll be getting no defenses from me for this film.
Really?
Oh yeah, I've seen someone say that like they should have swapped around Lupita and Charlize, and I think I agree with it.
Oh no, no.
I just don't think Charlize, she didn't have it in her to handle that character in any interesting way. It was such a flat performance. Anyway, we'll get into performances.
Yeah, we'll get into. But let me just say quickly, I don't think she's to blame. I think Nolan is to blame. But we'll get into it in the gender segment.
But then Samantha Morton still took whatever script she was given and she gave us gold.
She had more to work with.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into
it. So yeah, the Calypso thing, I just wasn't feeling what I needed to feel, and I feel like she wasn't rich. However, when I really realized what they were doing with this version of Odysseus, and that it was going to be about the Odyssey is not actually the physical Odyssey, it's the Odyssey of the mind, it's a psychological journey he has to overcome, blah, blah, blah. And he and she both need to basically convince him to get up and just go, right? The moment where he stands up and we finally see him pulling the raft together and he goes on the ocean, and despite all the storms raging, the music swells, Matt Damon is clinging onto the raft, and you realize he's finally on his way home. It worked on me emotionally.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, I felt it. And I think something like that is the difference between you and me's opinions on the film. Like, I think
exactly
that's working on you is the difference between me thinking is good to mid and it's not working on you is why you think it's mid to good. Do you know what I mean?
No, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
because
it didn't
work for me.
It is very important for that scene to work on you for this whole film to work. Because the Odyssey, you have to be rooting for Odysseus getting back home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually found the moment quite like emotionally uplifting. But I understand why a lot of people have problems with it.
Were you emotionally invested in Odysseus' return before that?
Well, the thing is, I like Matt Damon a lot, so I just wanted him to be happy.
Okay. But you're coming for me because I like Agamemnon.
I don't think they did enough to properly like enter into the mindset of longing and yearning for
Yes.
home and his loved ones.
Exactly.
For Odysseus. But we'll get into it with adaptation.
Yeah.
I don't even think this is what this film is trying to do.
Yes, I have a problem with it. But let's talk about Act 3.
In Act 3, Odysseus miraculously reaches Ithaca. No, they do not explain how he gets there. And he learns from Eumaeus, that's John Leguizamo, about his son's fate and how he has gone to go and look for him and everything. Telemachus, meanwhile, he returns from Sparta, but then the suitors have sent his goons to go and attack him. They end up killing Mentor, but Odysseus rescues Telemachus while in disguise as like a beggar.
Disguise, quote unquote.
Quote unquote in disguise, a hood. Stop hating this, stop hating. And then, so they start heading home, and after Odysseus's old dog, so Odysseus tells Telemachus that he's Sinon. After Odysseus's old dog Argos recognizes Odysseus, and the way he recognizes him is this old dog, which by the way is supposed to be 20 years old, aka 140 human years, just shifts his head slightly 1 millimeter and shifts his tail another millimeter. That's the recognition. Telemachus then realizes that Odysseus is his father, and Tom Holland gives Dee the performance that she was waiting for. Anyway, they have a whole feast at home. After the feast, Odysseus, still disguised, confesses to Penelope that he feels guilt for violating Zeus's law with the Trojan horse, killing innocent Trojans, and desecrating Athena's statue after killing her priestess. And then we see a scene of during the sacking, and you see that the character that Zendaya has been playing this whole time, her face is the face of the priestess that we see during the sacking of Troy. And as his men behead her, they're also cutting off the head of the statue of Athena. Odysseus admits that his deeds inspired tales of murderous people from the seas. He begs Penelope for forgiveness. Penelope then declares that she's going to marry whoever can string Odysseus's bow and shoot an arrow through a row of axe heads. Odysseus is the only one that can meet the challenge in the room amongst the suitors, and by doing it, he reveals his identity. A fight ensues. People start killing each other. Antiochus, played by Robert Pattinson, is screaming, "Send the swords! Send the shields! Pick up the shields!"
Hilarious.
I have so much to say about Robert Pattinson's performance in Act 3. The remaining suitors then surrender. Odysseus kills Antigonus, and he tells him that I have a whole message from Sinon, the bravest man I ever knew, because Sinon had given him some gold objects that he had gotten
Athena,
from Robert Pattinson.
It's basically an Inception totem, basically. That's what's really going on.
Ultimately, what we then see is that he cedes his throne to Telemachus, and he leaves Ithaca with Penelope to seek peace in exile, sailing west to honor the dead. Stop laughing, D. The pair expect civilization's renewal and means that the songs will forget Odysseus's mistakes. What did you think about Act 3?
Act 3. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. It's better than Act 1, but it's still significantly worse than Act 2. There are two things I like about Act 3 and plenty of things I don't like. So let me start positively. Let me start off with the positive. John Leguizamo as Eumaeus delivers the other strong emotional scene in this film for me, and it's when he's been attacked by Antinous and his mob, basically, and Odysseus comes back in his quote-unquote disguise, and Eumaeus turns around and you can see that he's been beaten. This is an old blind man, and he basically says that he can't believe how much Ithaca has fallen, and that like we have had no king for so long, and like things are going really. There was something about that just really hit me emotionally in a way that nothing else in this film did, and I could only give credit there to John Leguizamo. I really enjoyed that. Another thing that I really liked about Act 3 is that the message ultimately, right? So this is when I realized that ultimately the film is making an anti-war commentary. It's not the Odyssey of the poem, essentially, and it's properly critiquing masculinity and all of these sorts of things, which is cool. I guess I'll say a 2.5 if you like, is that if I interpret this film favorably, I would argue that this film is asking, if you want to interpret it as like the Odyssey, then that means that this film has recontextualized what home is, and that's a question that I'm really, really, really interested in. I.e., what is the home? Is the home a place? Is it a city? Is it a house? Is it a feeling? Is it a person? And so you can interpret this film by saying that Odysseus did go home, and he is home because he's with Penelope, who's the love of his life. That's the favourable way to interpret this film and the poem, but we'll get into what I really think is going on with Odysseus later on. As I mentioned, there are so many things I don't like. First of all, the big issue I have with Act 3 is that this idea about Telemachus has gone on a coming-of-age journey and now he's going to lead Ithaca, completely unearned. Completely unearned. And that's because of Christopher Nolan, and yes, it's also because of Tom Holland. I didn't get the sense that the Tom Holland we see at the end of the film, has he materially grown from the beginning? No, he hasn't. This film does a lot of like telling and not showing as well, and this is like a prime example of that. It tries to tell us that Telemachus has grown, but we didn't see that. You didn't take me on that journey, so I don't believe that this man is about to run Ithaca when half of the suitors are still there, the same people that were about to run him out of his own house. You're trying to tell me this young boy is going to go and lead those people? Not happening. Also, you know, again, I told you the favorable reading of what happens with Odysseus and going home. But the unfavorable reading of it is that actually this film just doesn't care about the idea of him coming. And so that's kind of disappointing, because that's the whole point of the Odyssey. So it's like, well, what did we just watch then? And also that final fight scene doesn't work for me at all.
It's a problem. It's a problem.
It doesn't work at all because, and actually that's another thing I do like. I want to shout out Robert Pattinson. Maybe you didn't like the performance. The performance is overacted, it's camp, yes it is, but the reason why I liked it is because he's the only person giving me a sense of urgency in this final scene. Like, Odysseus is 40-something-year-old. Matt Damon in real life is 55 years old. You've come back to fight over 120-something-year-old men. You're not desperate enough for me, bro. I'm not convinced that this man is basically trying to fight for his life, his son's life, his wife's life, you know, the Eumaeus' life. I don't get that. I just see it as like, it's clearly just like a blockbuster action film. I don't feel anything. And it's so disappointing. And then the things that I like literally ruined the film for me, the two things I hate the most in this film.
The dog.
Back to back. Argus. Christopher Nolan, how did you fumble the Argus moment? Homer literally did the hard work for you. I don't get that. It was over in like 10 seconds. I was like, really? And you know, what I find so funny about reading the Odyssey is like, you can see that basically dogs have been used to manipulate readers for thousands of years now. So I didn't even know it was that long a thing. But think about how dog-centric our world is now. Christopher Nolan, Homer basically gave you the opportunity to get your Oscar just off of that scene alone, and you fumbled it. And what really pissed me off is that they sacrificed time with the Argus moment to give more time to Telemachus, i.e. handing the attention over to Tom Holland, who absolutely fumbles it. Absolutely fumbles it. I didn't feel anything. What do you mean you're the first human to recognize that Odysseus has returned, and you're basically, there's no emotion? I was more excited to see my dad return home from work on a random Tuesday than what I saw from Tom Holland. So this is when I was like, no, this performance is actively bad, right? In the beginning, I was fine with it, but at the end of Act 3, I was completely disappointed. So yeah, it's all over the place for me. As when it comes to Athena, final comment on this act, this is when, like, and we'll get into it when we talk about the adaptation itself, but this adaptation feels really atheist and agnostic. And I'm not coming for anyone who's atheist or agnostic, because I myself, I'm in that category, but this is a Greek mythology, right? And there's something about it that is so critical of the religion itself that it's like, it continuously takes me out of the film. So when I realized that, like, Athena wasn't real this whole time, and that, it's basically, you can interpret it at least as Odysseus' hallucinations because of his PTSD, because of the war.
Ooh,
I was like, hold on. So wait, so there were no gods in this film?
D, you and I are really the same person, because you're the only person that everybody seems to be pushing back on the notion that Nolan is not interested in gods in this film. And I'm like, how are you guys not seeing this?
I don't know how they're saying that.
I'm like, how are you guys not seeing this? That Athena is presented that you're supposed to read this as there's no god in this film.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I watched it, I was like, this is an atheist telling of this story. And I don't know if it's because of you and I's predilection towards atheist opinions, but I was like, Nolan is telling you in this film that everybody that believes in a god in this film is deluded. I don't understand how people are not seeing that. Like, I'm so happy you just said that, because I feel like I've been losing my mind that people are arguing with me that, oh no, but there's still magic in the film. So like, when the storms happen, it's still Poseidon. I'm like, no.
It's just a bad wind.
No, it's just a bad wind. Like, Nolan is saying that they are associating those things happening with them with a belief in a god, the way people do in real life right now with religion. But he's not saying that the gods exist. And in fact, the confirmation is Athena. And I don't know how people are not seeing that, but like, we'll get into that in a second.
What
And I
did you
think
think?
Nolan has tried to walk it back himself with what he said that, oh, I'm not necessarily saying the gods don't exist. Yes, you are.
Yes, he is.
Yes,
Yes,
you
he
are.
is. And what's so
Uh,
jarring for me is like, as someone who I didn't love the Odyssey, but I did like the Iliad a lot, and the gods are so dramatic in the Iliad. I miss them. This whole film, I was like, where are they? Like, even the gods I can't stand, like Hera, and to be honest, even Athena, can't stand them because they're anti-Trojan. I was like, where are they? I want to see their bickering. I want to see their nonsense. And it was just like, okay, you want to make this a very human story. Fair enough. But yeah,
okay.
what did you think?
I'm a lot softer on the third act than you, even though I understand your criticisms. I actually didn't think Tom Holland was that terrible in the third act, although I do agree with you that there isn't a sense of thrill, swell,
Mm-hmm.
emotional explosion that there should be if you have successfully convinced me of these people's feelings for each other in
Yeah.
this film. Um, but at the same time, I still overall enjoyed it. I thought Robert Pattinson was chewing up the scenery way too much in the third act, which I wouldn't have minded per se if everybody else was on that same energy, but they weren't. So like
Okay.
there was just like a tonal shift I kept on
Yeah.
getting when they would switch from Robert Pattinson to Matt Damon, Robert
Mm-hmm.
Pattinson to Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson to Tom Holland, giving me close to nothing. That it was jarring for me. It was
I get
very,
it.
very jarring. The dog thing was just very, very deeply unserious. First of all, that dog to me did not look like it was at death's door. Personally, that
Nah.
dog looked a bit too healthy for me. I was like, this dog is supposed to be 140 human years old. It shouldn't even have any hair left on his body. It should be shaking every time it moves. It looked like a dog that just hadn't eaten its lunch yet.
Yeah.
And when he finally sees Odysseus, he kind of like vaguely raises its brow at him. I was just like, nah, 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 nah. This
Nah.
is not giving me much. But and yet, and also I agree, the action sequence, the choreography of it at the end is like questionable.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I was still happy to see Odysseus come. I still found it thrilling and fun. I enjoyed Matt Damon's physicality of his performance when he was in the
Yes.
hood, actually,
Okay. Yeah.
because like the idea that like they weren't going to disguise him, like he's not going to wear a fake beard or fake costume or whatever, but instead he's just going to shadow himself in the hood. And in certain kind of scenes, it required Matt Damon to actually hold himself in a very particular way to not show his features. And I actually thought he did a good job, but I am biased. Um, then the very ending, which kind of confirms this film's thesis basically about war and human how we treat each other as humans, it just about worked for me. So when they
Okay.
reveal that Zendaya that we've been seeing this whole time is the priestess, and just like Oppenheimer, they've shown us the ending of this film since the beginning, right? They
Yes.
did that Nolan thing. I was like, ah, I see what you're doing here. You're doing an Oppenheimer thing. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't mad at it. Also, because to me, that was a confirmation that the gods do not exist in this world. And when I realized that I am watching like basically an atheist reimagining of the Odyssey, I found that conceptually interesting. I have my criticisms of how it's executed and why Nolan insisted on doing it that way. But like as an idea, I was kind of intrigued about it theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't mad at it. And I actually did think the anguish of Odysseus's feeling like he has broken the fabric of human
Yeah.
civilization. I actually thought it was pretty much delivered well. So again, for those reasons, like even though there's a lot of problems with the flow of the
Mm-hmm.
scenes in the final act, overall thematically is pretty much a success for me, and that's why overall I would still call this one good. And the time was not a problem for me. At this
Yeah.
point, I was 2 hours 14 minutes into this film, and I wasn't like nervous, I wasn't like anxious, I wasn't waiting for it to be over. I knew it was going to be over eventually, but like I was okay with all the time I had spent in the cinema. I didn't feel like my money was wasted
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I'd agree.
I do think this the whole shtick they did with is he dying in her arms or not? Oh no, he's waiting
Mm.
on the ship for her. They're sailing off, he's self-exiling, was a bit I've seen some people even argue that he actually dies in her arms and he's just imagining what it could be for them to sail off together and his son gets to still retain his throne, and of which that Claire's accessories crown that they put on Tom Holland's head, it wasn't it at all. It wasn't it at all. But so that was it. It seems a bit too cutesy for me, but
Yeah.
still enjoyable overall.
I think it's worth pointing out quickly as well that the final shot is a direct callback to Oppenheimer. In Oppenheimer, um, that final shot, if you remember, it's actually one of my favorite parts of the film. You have Oppenheimer with like dread. He has the world's dread on his face, and then we see like the atomic bomb going off. In this film, we see Odysseus looking stressed. He's in the middle of the war, and he's staring at the Trojan horse, I guess, contemplating what he is now unleashed on society. So, like you said, this film is very much in conversation with Oppenheimer. Okay, let's talk about the poem. So we've both read the poem, the epic from Homer. What were your thoughts on
I struggled with the poem. I was kind of bored by it. I'm not a big
it?
classics person.
Mm-hmm.
We both read Emily Wilson's translation,
Yes.
and her prologue is much. There's a lot of contextualizing of the translation and the introduction and everything like that. And I understand the purpose it's serving, but because I'm not a literature buff when it comes to like classic poetry or prose, I didn't get thrill out of learning the lore about even the process
Mm-hmm.
of translating it. I think other people that are more into this stuff would. The time I finally started reading the poem itself and the many, 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 many books it consists of, it was just a bit of a drag for me. Like when I want to, I can read books very, very fast. But the fact that this one was dragging for me is like a sign that I'm just not that compelled by the narrative. And this is a translation that has been made to be very easily
Mm-hmm.
consumed by a modern day person. So imagine if I was actually reading one of the more classically translated texts. I did though find like some of the colorful ways they describe stuff to be kind of fun and interesting. The fundamental story, which is about, I don't know, like a stamina or whatever, determination, I
Mm-hmm.
did feel it through the story. It is extremely patriarchal, but I already knew
Oh
this going
gosh.
in. Like, it is
Yes.
obsessed with machismo and like the most performative ways of what being a man is. But I already knew all of this going in, so it didn't like shock me
Yeah.
that much. Also, it's structurally quite a strange text in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how you slip between the present, the past, and the future. And sometimes it was a bit like it threw me off. Exactly, what am I reading? Am I reading a flashback? Am I reading a person recounting a memory? Am I reading a conversation between the gods? It took me a second to
Yeah.
understand that sometimes this whole thing's going to make me sound really dumb. I promise I'm not a dumb person. I just don't really like classics that much. So yeah, that's my overall feeling on the book. And I think because I'm not that attached to the text, that's why this film as an adaptation didn't bother me that much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't love the Odyssey for reasons that you've kind of alluded to. It's deeply patriarchal. I actually think that the biggest antagonist in the poem is the concept even of a woman's sexuality, right?
Oh,
That's what the Odyssey is really about, and I think this is also why I'm not connecting with Nolan's film. The Odyssey is like when you strip out all of the years, and he needs to go home, and the Nostos and the Xenia, or like so homecoming, and what does Xenia mean again, like treatment of guests basically. When you strip all of that out, what's really happening here is Odysseus must get back to Penelope before another man
before
defiles
these
her,
men snatch
and
her.
it's very important for him as a quote unquote masculine warlord Greek man that he's able to do that before anyone else. That's what it's really
Not
about.
quote unquote.
Yeah. And what I find so interesting, like, even though I hate everything, all of these dynamics, right, I still find that scene between Agamemnon and Odysseus to be so funny, where Agamemnon, this big warlord guy who's caused all of this problem, he's basically saying to Odysseus, "Oh, do you know that woman? Do you know what she did to me? Make sure your wife isn't like that. You know, it's there's something about it which I find hilarious." But yeah, it almost feels like a warning against your wife having any sort of sexual autonomy. And even in the
Mm.
poem, like Odysseus is so pent up about the idea of Penelope having sex with someone else. And I'm like, bro, you've been away for 20 years. Who really cares if she slept with someone else? Get over it. Like, if you get back home, you've both done what you've done, because that's another thing as well. In the poem, Odysseus is not faithful in the poem.
He stays fucking every
He's
single
in the
nymph and half
streets.
goddess that he can
He's in the street.
find.
And by the way, I'm not even mad at him. You've been away for 20 years. I'm not mad. Do what you need to do. Your
Not
wife,
do what you
she should
need
be
to
able to
do.
do what she needs to do. And then if you get back together, that's a wonderful thing. I will say, in defense of the poem, though, you can interpret it as a deeply romantic text. And there's some of that color that has been taken out from Nolan. So, like in the text, Odysseus says to
Yes.
one of the goddesses, I can't remember, he basically says that I know you're more beautiful than my wife. I could be immortal with you, but I really miss my wife and I'm going to go home. And basically, one of the goddesses, I think it's Calypso, turns him into a sex slave. 7 years,
Yeah.
and he's literally crying on the beach every day. You can interpret all of this as a deeply romantic text. I cannot do so personally, just because of all of the like. And Homer is insistent. He's insistent. It happens multiple times throughout the poem where you're warned that the positive wife, the good wife, is Penelope. She's gonna wait at home for you for 20 years. She's not gonna see with anyone else. She's only gonna be waiting for you. And then the bad wife is Clytemnestra, who, and Helen, by the way, Helen, who runs off with Paris, and then also Clytemnestra, who takes on a lover who happens to be Agamemnon's op. They both conspire to kill him together, and that's the bad wife. So yeah, all of that sort of stuff, it takes away from any romantic reading for me. I think it's worth pointing out that the poem differs from the film because the women are given a little bit more agency and color, I think, actually. So, for example, Penelope, the film presents it as like Penelope is this like she's waiting for her husband ultimately, but in the poem, she's very, very intelligent. So the deception that she does with the weaving and stuff, that's just one of the things she shows us. There's also another scene where like she outwits Odysseus to figure out if he's the real Odysseus when he comes home. All of this stuff gets cut, and like even Helen gets presented as a battered wife when actually in the text she's a lot more complicated than that. She's also very intelligent. So yeah, something worth pointing out. And also, I think if you like the story of the Odyssey and you have the patience to deal with a classic text, highly recommend go and read the Iliad, especially if you like the film, because the film isn't really just an Odyssey adaptation. There's a lot of stuff from the Iliad and even the Aeneid as well. So that's worth pointing out. On that note, let's discuss Christopher Nolan's Odyssey as an adaptation of the poem. What do you have to say about that?
This is barely an adaptation of the Odyssey, and it sounds like I'm exaggerating when I'm saying that, but I'm really not, because the Odyssey has been adapted so many times. There are many things that we all consume that we don't even realize we're basically consuming an Odyssey adaptation. The whole idea of a man trying to get back home and going through treacherous journeys to do it is a continuous trope
By
in
Nolan
so many
himself as
things we
well.
consume, including by Nolan. There's a reason, in fact, that we call when a person is going on a complicated journey, we say they're going on an odyssey. Like it is such a basically at this point an instrument of storytelling, right? And so what I'm saying is because the concept of an odyssey is done so many times, for you to understand what Nolan has done here, he has so thoroughly departed from the intention of the Odyssey. Not even it's not even just the little things like, oh, did the guy take out the wax or not before he jumped to the sirens? Oh, was this exactly how Odysseus hid his face? No, I mean like the theme of what is driving Odysseus in the story and who he is
Fundamentally different.
fundamentally, it is a complete and utter departure from the text. I have seen some historians and literary experts say no, it actually isn't. That you can read the Odyssey as the physical Odyssey he goes through was always a metaphor
Yes.
for his difficulties with confronting what he had done and the war he had just waged. And this is taking that metaphor and really, really blowing it up and spelling it out across the whole story. Personally, I don't agree based on the
I
way
don't
I
buy
read
it.
that text,
Yeah.
but I'm also acknowledging that I read a particular translation, and the Odyssey is an oral history. Every version that we read or we hear is quite an evolution from the previous one that came before, and the one that came before, and the one that came before. So, like, it has gone through many versions. But I personally believe, based on the ones I've read and the way I understand that text, that is not fundamentally what the story is about. This story is not fundamentally about essentially a PTSD war
Yeah.
veteran. I don't believe so. Um, but I think Nolan has decided that is what he wants it to be. And for that reason, to me, this is barely an adaptation of the Odyssey, the text as we know it. Also, part of the reason why I kind of disavowed myself of expecting him to be very serious with it, because I'm like, this film has like the whole Athena Xenia thing is so like that is not the point of Odysseus. And Odysseus as a character in this story is not even the cunning, strategic, mastermind leading a bunch of idiots. His men are not really idiots in this film, and Odysseus is not dramatically presented to be that much more cunning or clever and manipulative than they are. So therefore, like, neither the core character nor the core motivation.
Yeah, so as I alluded to, I think that the strongest theme in the Odyssey is the sexual dynamics between the women and the men, namely Penelope and Odysseus versus Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. You can even talk about Menelaus and Helen as well. A little bit of lore as well. You can even go down to the next generation. So Agamemnon's son, Orestes, he actually kills Helen in other lore, whereas Telemachus is actually, he's not going to kill anyone. He just kind of fades away, and then he goes and marries his father's side chick. But that's another point. So, so as I mentioned, the sexual dynamics are really important, and Nolan decides to completely remove all of that. That's fine, that's his choice. But the issue is, I think I wasn't expecting a direct adaptation. I never do with these sorts of things. But I think that I expect the director to understand that if you're removing a particular dynamic, right, you need to understand what other parts of the story have you now impacted. And the biggest part of the story that he impacts by removing and completely desexing the film is Odysseus's motivation to go home. And then to make things even worse, he changes the narrative such that Odysseus doesn't even remember his home. So now, as an audience member, I have no reason to root for Odysseus. I don't understand why Odysseus and Penelope are so in love with each other. The film doesn't tell me that. The poem does. The poem shows me that Penelope and Odysseus are so deeply in love with each other because they are intellectual equals. As I mentioned, Odysseus recognizes that these goddesses are beautiful. I could live an immortal life with them, but I would rather go home to Penelope. And it sounds like it's because she's his equal intellectually. Do I get any of that in the film? No. And that's because Nolan takes he takes out certain really important character development aspects of the text in order to shove this like whitewashed Odysseus down our throats. And it's because it is obviously a blockbuster movie. It's important for him to create a superhero effectively. That's what Matt Damon's playing in this film. He's playing a superhero who the ordinary audience member can root for. But at the end of the day, it's far less interesting than the Odysseus that's in the poem. So like when it comes to the adaptation stuff, it doesn't work. I will say that when it comes to like reading the Odyssey, reading this as like a genuine adaptation of the Odyssey, you can read it that way. But I think in order to do so, you need to accept that Nolan has redefined what home is. Because remember, one of the broad themes in the poem is Nostos, which is homecoming. And obviously in the poem, Odysseus does get his homecoming because he goes home safely. He reunites with his family. But obviously in the film, he never does that. He actually rejects leaving Ithaca and lives in exile. So either you're throwing Nostos out of the window or you're redefining home and saying that Penelope is his home. It doesn't land for me in the film. So I'm just like, you haven't really thought about it, have you? You just wanted to shove this like war PTSD film down our throats, and I found it boring.
On that note, right, let's talk about this as an adaptation in terms of who was cast in this film, how they were cast. For a lot of the people that are up in arms about the multiracial cast, right, and quote unquote, they would have wanted Greek representation. I don't actually believe most of them do, but I'll get to that in a second. I think when you watch this film and you see the quote unquote points that Nolan is trying to make, I have come to the conclusion that he was intentional with the casting on purpose. And both in terms of casting multiracial people, including Black and Asian people, and in terms of casting Elliot Page. And in the response that he has had to the backlash from like the racist and the queerphobic people, which was basically you're irrelevant, like it's to very much like push it away, right? He's, as far as I know, he hasn't tried to apologize for it at all.
No.
Part of that is because Nolan can throw his weight around because the film has ultimately proved to be a commercial success, and the go woke, go broke of it all hasn't touched him the way it has touched some more nervous filmmakers. And I think this is a good thing for humanity, by the way. There's a decision being made here about how we should treat each other despite our differences, despite people initially presenting as strangers to each other. And that is why he went out of his way to cast such a cast that is going to create so much backlash. I have mixed feelings on it because I'm like, you're putting these people in harm's way. Right? And I'm happy ultimately the film was a commercial success, so like this is not going to be a stain on their careers. But like I was genuinely concerned for a while that I was like, Lupita is having to wake up every morning and see these like hateful memes that these people are making about her. Elliot Page, you're sending nasty stuff to him and his family every day. Like, it's some dark stuff. Like, is it really worth it? But I think to the intention of this as a reimagining of what Zeus's law or Xenia is supposed to be, that is exactly the point that this is trying to make. I think one thing that a lot of the people that are pretending that this is about Greek identity as opposed to white identity keep on missing is the fact that the Greek Empire that is being referenced as of the time of this text and of this prose does not look like the Greece, the nation that exists today only. I think there's another thing that I keep on finding funny about when people talk about it. The same way the Roman Empire was much more broad than what Rome, the city, is today. The Greek world that is being referenced in the Odyssey, the text, spans from Ethiopia to North Africa to India to Iraq to Iran to, yes, modern day Greece to Italy. Like, the spread and the spectrum of people that would belong to this world is not just people that live in modern day Greece. And so when I see people crying and crying about Lupita and even Himish Patel, I'm like, Himish Patel probably looks more like a person that you would find in the eastern edge of the Greek Empire than Matt Damon. So I can't take that part of the criticism seriously. I do think there would have been an interesting version of this film where you actually cast Mediterranean actors. And Mediterranean is a spread. Mediterranean includes Greek people, includes Italian people, includes North Africans to me, includes Middle Eastern people, includes Western Asian people. I would have been interested in that. But since they're clearly not doing that, I don't think casting white and black and East Asian people is any more outrageous than casting just white people, which is what they want, by the way. They don't actually care
Yeah.
about Greek representation.
So when it comes to the Xenia point, I get what you're saying, but I can't give Christopher Nolan that just because Xenia is so poorly examined in the film.
I
So
agree.
again, his choice to remove certain aspects such as the Phaeacians, I think Phaeacians, there's a family that treats them really well and they're a perfect example of good
Yes.
Xenia.
Yes.
Gone.
Yes.
Why?
I agree.
We're
I
only
was
seeing the negative Xenia.
I was thinking to myself as I was watching the film that, like, if I hadn't read the text, would I even understand the concept of this Zeus law that they keep on explaining beyond an extreme surface level?
But again, this is where the atheist agnostic thing comes in. He's talking about Xenia or Zeus or whatever you want to call it as like a superstition. But it wasn't just a superstition. Like in the film, they present it as if like they only perform Xenia because they're scared that the gods will be angry at them if they don't. But in the poem, we get that actually Xenia is seen as something that it's like a positive thing that you contribute to the world. So it's almost like a carrot versus stick scenario. And the film presents it as if people are doing it because of a stick situation where they're fearful of punishment. But the poem shows us it's more complicated than that. And actually, it's just out of the goodness of your heart sometimes. On the racial casting, for me as well, when all the dialogue was going on and when the cast came out in particular and I realized there wasn't a single Greek in this film, I was like, that's a bit extreme even for me. I'm going to be honest, right? Having said that, when I watched the film and I realized what was going on, that went straight out of the window because I realized this isn't about Greece. This is about modern day America. This is a commentary. This is about Western world.
This film might as well be about a veteran in Mississippi fresh off of the Iraq War.
It's just using the Greek mythology as a way to tell that story.
I would go even further. I don't even think it's just Western. It's very USA. It's a very capital A American film. It doesn't even feel like Western Europe to me. It feels, and it's the casting of Matt Damon that contributes to this. Is the choice to have them not just do American accents, but to do every man American accent. They don't even ask them to do an American accent that sounds like a particularly regal or refined or transatlantic version. No, they're all just doing generic American talking. So immediately it just like brings everything down to this like everyday, every man tone. And you combine that with the clear war veteran PTSD narrative that's being done here and very contemporary style approaches to what masculinity is. That was just like, yeah, this is just an American film. It's just a Hollywood film.
When they get to the first village and there's a village that basically they set it on fire and they run away because they think that they're the sea people. And even that concept of the sea people, that's very clearly a commentary on colonialism, which I can very much imagine people like Vasco da Gama, these original colonizer incel people, they would have read Homer and thought this was a fantastic story, let's go replicate it, right? But when they first get to that island, did you notice that the person who they're speaking to, the local, he's speaking Greek? Did you know that?
What, like modern Greek?
I believe it's modern Greek. Yeah.
They said here have this
Yes.
Greek people. That's not
Yes.
right.
Which
That's not right.
that's one thing. But also, I just wonder if there's a commentary in there. What does it mean to have our cast, who are representing ancient Greece, quote unquote, speak to modern Greeks, if you like, in their language? What's Nolan really trying to tell us there? I haven't really come to a conclusion, but I thought it was interesting.
I was thinking to myself that this, are you being a hypocrite? Because there's this whole conversation about children of blood and bone going on right now, and how like
Mm-hmm.
pretty much all of the main cast are either African Americans or non-Nigerian Africans or diaspora Nigerians. Like pretty much nobody
Mm-hmm.
in the main prominent cast is a Nigerian from the continent who was raised on the continent. And I have had a serious problem with it.
As you should.
And I was like, is it fair of me to be that pissed about that, but to be hand waving, or some could read it as me being hand waving about the Odyssey? I don't think it's the same thing, partly because of how little representation there is of my culture
Yeah.
in Hollywood and pop culture to start with, versus Greek or Mediterranean or European culture. I also don't think it's the same thing because Homer is not around with us today. Arguably, Homer didn't even exist. This is oral history that has been distorted and twisted and told to represent the teller's lived realities over time. Whereas Children of Blood and Bone is a contemporary novel that was just published a few years ago by a living Yoruba woman who said initially that she wanted it to represent these Yoruba characters. And the names of the characters and the places they live in exist in Nigeria right now today.
Mm-hmm.
Um so to me, it's still not exactly the same thing, but I do reflect on it that like I know how pissed I am. So like I can't be too mad at Greek people
Yeah.
specifically. But the rest of these like white Americans and white English people that are being fake outraged, I'm not taking a lot of them seriously.
Especially because they would be considered barbarians. Literally, if the Greeks
Yes.
saw Himesh Patel, or if they saw especially Lupita, they'll be like, "Oh, I heard about you. You people, Poseidon in the poem. Poseidon said he just came back from Ethiopia and he had a great time over
Mm.
there." Like, whereas these English people, they would be faced with spears immediately because it's like, "Who are you?" Like,
They'll be like, what is this
what is
savage?
this? You know? Does the Odyssey pass the Bechdel test?
Just about.
Yes.
Just about passes the Bechdel test. I had to be checking myself, especially when we got to the final act. I was like, the person I was watching it with, I was like, have two women spoken to each other in this film? The way it passes is through Penelope and
Yeah.
Melanth, so Mia Goth and Hathaway. But just about, because I think in the first act, I think Penelope maybe makes a comment to Melanth, but she doesn't respond.
Yes.
In the
Mm-hmm.
second act, I do not believe two women speak to each other once. Then finally in the third act, there's an exchange between Penelope and Melanth when Penelope is trying to, I mean, Melantha, I think she's trying to hide away up in that little platform
Mm-hmm.
that Penelope weaves in when the suitors have started fighting. And Penelope tells her basically, I think your place belongs there
You
or something
good.
like that.
Yeah.
You look good right there. And they have a clear exchange that is not directly about a man. So it
Yeah.
passes based on that. But that, I think to me, I think that's the only way it passes. Am I mistaken?
There is another moment when Robert Pattinson comes in to speak to Penelope and try to woo her, and in that process, Penelope tells Melantha to, I think she says, leave us or something, because she figures out that Melantha is the one that's telling the
Mm.
suitors what's going on. So yeah, it barely passes.
This is a post-recording update from Diz. Upon rewatching this film, my position is that this film does not clearly pass the Bechdel test. There are only three spoken interactions between women in the film. The first time, Penelope says leave us to Melantho when Antonius comes to proposition her. Melantho doesn't respond. The second time, when Telemachus returns to Ithaca, Penelope asks the general room, where is Telemachus? Talking about a man. Melantho then goes up to her and says, my queen, surely your place is up there. And then Penelope doesn't respond to her. And then the third time, during the final suitor fight, Penelope says to Melantho, surely your place is down there. Melantho doesn't respond to her. None of these three are unambiguous passes of the Bechdel test, in my opinion.
In fairness, though, the poem isn't much better, so But to be fair, Christopher Nolan, he could have done more to develop the women if he
could
wanted
have,
to.
because
He clearly didn't want to.
there's a lot of female characters in this film with a lot of prominent powerhouse actresses. Zendaya,
Yes.
Lupita, and Hathaway, Charlize Theron, and Samantha Morton all at the same time. Like, yeah, I get it in the text. Many of them don't directly interact with each other, but you've already twisted and turned so many other parts of the story. There's an interesting way you could have the engagement of women with each other. Because I also think there's also the old woman that, stitched Odysseus's feet, who is there in a
Yes.
lot of the scenes alone with Penelope. Yeah, they don't have any exchanges directly, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the fact that obviously the men are constantly talking to each other in this film about things that have nothing to do with women. Now, again, it's a very patriarchal text at its core, but I was just like, you just can't help yourself. Like,
I'm just so shocked that like Homer was able to write more interested women than Christopher Nolan. And not only that,
stop.
Christopher Nolan managed to remove the little crumbs of agency that we get for the women in Homer. And that's a choice. That's a choice. Right? Because let's get into it. Let's talk about Helen. Let's talk about it because I'm pissed. In the poem, yes, Helen is, I think even in the poem, they allude to the fact that Helen was just an excuse. In the Iliad, the soldiers go out of their way to say that they don't see the hype about this woman. Why am I at war for this woman? I went to go reread that book again to see, is there any subtext that I'm missing here? How can you read this book and interpret it as Helen is this like domestic violence victim? And my theory is that Nolan interprets Helen that way because that is the only way he thinks that we as an audience can be sympathetic towards her.
Oh, but is
Which
he wrong
is
about
a
certain
problem.
members of his audience, though?
I understand that, but I'm just like, really? That goes to show you how limited his writing is, right? Because if the
Yes.
only way you think that you can convince people to be sympathetic, I felt sympathetic for Cersei, who just turned those men into pigs. I can feel sympathetic for Helen without you scarring her face. And then you need to consider the racial aspect here. Because obviously, Lupita's casting was the one that set the fire off when it comes to this film, right?
She really was the face that launched 1,000 ships.
Literally, these men are so dumb. They literally proved
Yeah,
it
they
that she's
proved
the right
point.
casting.
Yeah.
But I was fine with it before I watched the film. Then when I watched the film, I was like, me too, I'm not happy with this casting. Why did you cast Helen this way? And then your thought was to cast a black woman that way. That's the part I'm struggling with.
Because the story goes that he told Lupita that she was the one specifically he wanted to play that role.
But that's what I'm saying. When he said that, he already knew that he was going to have a scarred Helen in the picture. I remember all of these intros have been talking about, oh, her face didn't launch 1,000 ships. Then in the film, we have Menelaus say, oh yeah, it's only launching 500 now. I was just like, no, hell no, I'm not feeling this Helen at all. What did you think about Helen?
I just thought that the film, as a film, without knowledge of the text, doesn't even explain what's going on properly there at all.
Exactly, they don't even mention Paris.
In my opinion, I think even as a person that knows the poem, I still was like, huh? It was like blink and you miss it. So like
Yes.
Anne Hathaway and Matt Damon, Penelope and Odysseus had a conversation in like a flashback scene where they were kind of like laying out what created the circumstances that led to the Trojan War, where they do kind of reference Helen, but I don't even know if they mention her directly by name.
No.
So like that barely really locks in for you as an audience member, in my opinion, who doesn't understand the context of the text. Then when we now have Telemachus arrive in Menelaus's place with Helen, and Lupita is kind of slightly out of focus for a bit, and then you realize she's there, and then she turns and you see the face, and then John Bertnell does his whole
mafia boss
straight out of Chicago, straight out of New York City in 2026 performance. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's Lupita, there's Helen. Okay, let's get into it. And then there's kind of some expositionary dialogue. But even with the exposition, they still don't really give you the meat of what has happened here. Right? And it's all a bit blink and you miss it. And then later on as well, when they're in Hades and Agamemnon is explaining what happened with his wife, and you kind of see her rage. Again, I was like, huh? Like, I don't know. I found it to be quite scattered in the storytelling, which is a big problem because Lupita to me is actually a very serious actress. So you utilize her in that way, in my opinion. So that was my main problem with it. I just thought it was scattered storytelling. When I watch it a second time, I'm sure it will make more sense to me. But I'm like, again, I have read the book. I've read the poem. So if it's seeming nonsensical to me, what's happening with the person that has zero context?
But I want to highlight the Clytemnestra point. For some reason, it didn't clock to me immediately what the implication of having a black woman play Clytemnestra in this film is. Again, in the poem, sexual dynamics are really important. It's basically about saying a good woman is a chaste woman, a faithful woman, a bad woman is a promiscuous woman, etc. Notice that Nolan has taken out all of the rest of the sexual politics in this film. The only woman who's weaponizing her sexuality in this film is the black woman, Clytemnestra. And technically Helen, because of course she runs off, if you understand the law, right? And I'm like,
which is not really explained in this film.
It's not. But again, I just don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just a bit suspicious. I'm probably traumatized. But Nolan, so you know you're gonna have a black woman be the only one in this film that's taking on that burden of like female sexuality, and your mind went straight to black woman. And you've already set off all of these incels who are already pissed at the situation, and now Lupita has to deal with all of that. I'm sorry, when I was watching the film, I wasn't happy with it.
To me, this film is just like desexed in general, and this is a problem I have with Nolan films. Let's talk about Cersei, let's talk about Calypso.
Yeah. I think, as we discussed already, Athena didn't work for me at all. Athena in the poem is she's a war goddess. She's a war, and I can't stand her in the Iliad. She's constantly getting involved, right? In this film, of course, she doesn't really exist because, as we discussed, this is basically a atheist interpretation of the Odyssey. But even this little flashback thing we have with Zendaya, it wasn't giving me anything. Like, even before we get the reveal, I didn't believe it was Athena. So, if anything, I was happy when the reveal comes. But, again, Nolan does it again. As much as I don't like Athena, she's a complicated woman, a goddess in the book. She's very strategic. She's very clever. That's actually why she likes Odysseus, because she relates to him on that front, right? So, you've taken one of the more interesting female characters from 3,000-year-old Homer's poem and completely removed it to replace it with this superhero Matt Damon. I'm just not feeling it. What do you think?
It didn't bother me as much because, again, I just don't really care that much about the text. So, like, the way Athena is characterized in text, which you're right, is completely different from this film. It didn't really move me either way. And I did kind of buy into the general theme of, like, guilt and PTSD and Oppenheimer of it all. So them using our assumption that was Athena, even though she wasn't, in my opinion, to get that point across does kind of actually work on me. Now, in terms of how fleshed out is that Athena-like character in this film, she's not. But I guess the argument is that she's just like a projection of his conscience. That is a cop-out though, because once again, Nolan loves making these wisps of women, like these women who are translucent, these women who are there but not really there, these women who you don't understand their interiority, but quote unquote, that's the point because of the text. It's a very normal Nolan cop-out. Now, no shade. I don't think Zendaya can handle much more than that anyway. So,
I mean, she was right. She was right for the role. Put it that way, you know, and she was fine at it. But no, Athena really didn't work. She's one of the big reasons why I didn't connect with this film. And then, of course, you have Cersei in the poem. She basically is a predator. Let's face it, Odysseus doesn't really consent to her. And by the way,
a lot of people raping Odysseus in that text.
With Cersei, right? She, again, the whole film is desexed. Samantha Morton is desexed in this film as well. And I find that kind of a cop-out. And I must mention that, like, a lot of people are criticizing the casting for Samantha Morton. I've even seen people say really horrible things, like she's a haggard old woman. And I'm like...
I feel like I've seen, like, universal praise for Samantha Morton.
No, I've seen some people, obviously, people like the scene, but I've seen people saying that, like, they should have had a quote-unquote, sexier woman in that scene so that you can see the sexual dynamic between Cersei and Odysseus. Because in the poem, Odysseus stays there for 1 year and fathers at least 2 children.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like we should have seen some sexual dynamic between them. But I will say I enjoyed Cersei the most in the film, actually. What did you think?
I think what you're seeing there is pretty much all Samantha Norton, because I don't trust that it's the writing, because he's never demonstrated that he can do that with the writing before. Agreed. I do think Nolan is aware of this criticism against him, and he approached the development of this film trying to attempt to address it. Really? And what we're witnessing, I think, but the women in this film are still more fleshed out than any women in any recent Nolan film. No, seriously, D.
But is that not Homer doing the heavy lifting? That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm not comparing it to his other film. I'm comparing it to the fact that he somehow managed to flatten Homer's women. That's crazy.
But that's the thing. That tells you how low the bar is.
Yeah.
Him flattening Homer's women is still an improvement on
That's crazy.
anything that was happening. Think about it. In
I get you.
Oppenheimer, in Inception, in Tenet, what is the fullness or dimensionality
They're
of the
basically
women
the
in those
Athena
films?
character.
Yeah, they're all the Athena character. So even though this is a flattening of the poem, it's still richer than Nolan is usually going to do. And I think this is his attempt to address that criticism, which is scary. So
Could all be solved just by getting a co-writer on board, though. That's why I can't really take it seriously that he's trying to attempt anything.
I will say I don't dislike the treatment of Athena, because to me that's not Athena. This film is not about the gods. It's about Odysseus as a war veteran. So as a character being just like a consciousness floating about,
woman,
it's okay for me.
And that's exactly the critique that people have been leveling at him for years, that your women are literally just a representation of the man's consciousness, and you've done it yet again with the most important female character in the film. Seriously?
Well, I don't know what to tell you, Dee. I will say that with Cersei and Calypso, and I'm going to talk about them together, I completely agree with you. The refusal to engage with the non-consensual elements of those stories, because again, I think to him, this is me fixing my mistakes with women, is that I'm not going to present them as like sexual predators the way they are in the text. Is like, again, is a sign of a weak writer when it comes to women. Like, an excellent writer of women knows how to handle villainous women or terrible women properly. A scared writer does not know how to handle terrible women without turning them into angelic women. And what I do know at the same time, that there's always been a critique of the Odyssey as a text, and even Emily Wilson talks about it in her introduction and her translator's notes, which is that the constant portrayal of these women that Odysseus ends up with on his way home to Penelope as these desperate, lonely, thirsty women that are just chasing after his dick is inherently patriarchal to start with, right? And so a feminist treatment of the text would always need to address that in some way. I don't think this way of addressing it by turning them into basically not at all insidious or predatory beings is like the solution, but it is an attempt to address a problem that I believe a lot of feminists have always had with the original story. And then, to me, this is why I don't fully agree with you that the problem comes with the writing, with my issues with Calypso, because to me, it's the same problem that's happening with both Cersei and Calypso, and the same attempt to handle it in both ways. One of them is more successful than the other because, no shade, the actress is just ready to take it more seriously than the other. One actress. Charlize Theron, bless her heart, again, her performance as Furiosa in Mad Max is one of the most important feminist action performances of film to me. But here, she was not at all interested in doing anything of substance. Charlize came here to come and sit on the beach with Matt Damon and then go home.
But hold on, though. I feel like, wait. With Calypso, she is still a reflection of Odysseus's consciousness, though, right? And that's my problem. Because in the poem, I would rather you give me the predatory woman. Just give me the predatory woman. Let me sit with it and let me deal with it. But here, it's like we don't even understand what's really motivating her. Like, why is she enslaved this man for 7 years? I don't know, because they weren't even having sex.
D, is the public ready to handle the predatory woman? I don't think an artist should be scared of the public or should be scared of the audience, but I think Christopher Nolan is a person that's constantly thinking about box office and scale and epicness in everything he does.
But he was able to give us Dominic Cobb, who, as far as I'm concerned, basically killed his wife in Inception. He was able to give us Oppenheimer and have us root for him when he basically created an atomic bomb that killed millions of people. Do you get what I'm saying? So
yeah, I think this film is an R-rated film, but not only is it sexless, it is also pretty much bloodless. So I think there's also a capitalism thing that's going on here. If you have an R rating, you can actually push what you're showing quite far. But this film is not interested in pushing into the grotesque. There is some horror elements to it, like especially in Hades and with the Cyclops and stuff like that.
Cersei.
But this film is not oh yeah, and there's body horror definitely with Cersei. But this film is not ready to get disgusting, gruesome, sexual, bloody, messy, because Nolan still wants this film to make over $1 billion.
But I'm just saying that the end result is far less interesting. One, Odysseus is far less interesting. All of the women are far less interesting. I'm not gonna lie, I'll probably say that I prefer Cersei in the film compared to the poem, to be fair. So I'll take her out of it. But my big issue with this film, I never got the understanding of why is this so urgent. And it's because all of that has been removed, because the film has been desexed, because there's a refusal to engage with Odysseus' like tribulations and also his hubris on his journey home. It's an issue. So that's a nice segue to talk about Odysseus, the hero in the film and also the hero of the poem. What did you think about the Odysseus in the film? Were you rooting for him? Were you happy with the characterization?
I always root for Matt Damon.
But you come for me because I like Agamemnon now.
Agamemnon is Benny Safdie D. You can't justify
I can't
that.
see anything.
I can't justify Matt Damon. I think everybody will agree with me about Matt Damon, especially now he's in his 50s. He honestly looks better than ever. Even the beard, which Christopher Nolan forced Matt Damon to grow, by the way, for this film.
He needed it.
Even the
He needed it.
Even the beard, it was doing it for me. I don't know what to tell you. So I don't know. I was rooting for him because it's Matt Damon.
I will give him some credit. His physique is important for this film because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't believe it if some lanky 50-year-old guy came back from 20 years at war and then is able to take out these 20-year-olds. I wouldn't believe that. So well done for him for maintaining his physique. It was good.
So if this man was built like David Corenswet, like Superman, if he was unnecessarily tall, unnecessarily steroided out, you would probably like this film more.
I probably would. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna be honest. If he was dressed like Agamemnon,
I'd have been like, weak at the knees, stand up, stand up, please. We can't have this whole feminist rant that we just did, and then this is how you're talking about Benny Safdie. I'm so sorry.
I can't lie on my biology. I can't lie. I didn't ask for that. All I saw was a big tall man and the aura when the gates of Troy opened.
No.
I was like, you know what? I take back everything I said about Agamemnon. Let's go.
Unacceptable. I can't defend anything you're saying here. I don't endorse any of this. So we haven't had anything serious to say about masculinity because, to be honest, this film doesn't have that much to say that's new that Nolan hasn't said before, in my opinion. In Oppenheimer, everything he's trying to say about masculinity in this film has already been said in Oppenheimer, in my opinion. But again, just like with Obsession, I understand how a lot of these things that seem kind of obvious to us, it's 101 for the general public and the new film watchers and the young people that are watching this kind of stuff for the first time. And I don't hate the fact that he's teaching them these lessons. I think 15, 20 years ago, big blockbusters, the way they treated quote-unquote super masculine heroes was less thoughtful than how this film is treating Odysseus. So I guess it's a net positive, but to me, I'm not gagging over anything it has to say about masculinity.
Actually, probably more favorable than you on this for two reasons. While watching the film, there were times when I was thinking this was analogous to the way how Western people from the United States, Europe, etc., how they move through the world. And not only how they move through the world today, but how they have moved through the world for the past few hundred years, actually, expecting good treatment when they arrive. And then actually, for many of us from colonized countries or, what have you, the single crime that we committed was welcoming these people. It was welcoming these people and providing them the good xenia, and they use it to their advantage to colonize. Right? So actually, if you look at it that way, that is still a very, very radical thing to talk about in a movie of this size. The other one is, I was thinking about the concept of Zeus's law again, I guess, xenia, or religion rather, and the way how the Greeks use it against the Trojans. So we see that basically, I think when Elliot Page is on the beach, one of the Trojans says, "Oh, the war's over, we have common gods, let's accept this," because they assume that because they have common gods that they can trust that this other group, the Greeks, will actually have respect for the gods, right? And that's the whole reason why they take this massive thing, Trojan horse, in, and ultimately it causes them to lose their civilization. And that also made me think about colonialism and how, like, for example, you know, think about our ethnicities in the Caribbean, in West Africa, and stuff like this, and the way how our people were basically given, if you like, politely, or more likely forced into believing in the Western God, so Christianity ultimately, and the way how those beliefs, whether we like it or not, are basically holding a lot of our countries back, because a lot of people rather believe in God is going to help me, as opposed to, like, our country's a mess, let's talk about how we can actually take the steps to improve it. So again, it's probably just me overthinking things, if I'm being honest, but I will say,
It's
like,
really that deep, D. It's always really.
but I think you can read it that way, and if that's what Nolan's intention was, hats off to him, because it's still a radical thing to say nowadays.
Yeah, you know what? I will caveat that there are certain parts of masculinity handling that I do think are interesting, and I'm happy that the film does. I think the stuff it does with Elliot Page is genuinely quite clever and good.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think casting a trans man who Nolan has worked with before pre-transition
Mm-hmm.
actually specifically works in this instance, right?
Why?
As all the people, because it is written into the script of this film that Elliot Page's character Sidon doesn't look like the rest of the typical Trojan
Mm-hmm.
soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
right? He is a bit smaller, more diminutive, and upon initial appearance, less of a physical threat than the rest of them. And it is
Yeah.
built into the story in that they picked someone that was a bit smaller, someone that would come of age over the journey to get to Troy, and who would
Mm.
essentially be a sacrificial lamb without telling them, even though this person would have actually done it anyway. Nolan is a person that likes to reuse his actors, and he worked with Elliot Page on Inception
Yeah.
pre-transition. There was a show called The Umbrella Academy that Elliot was on that they first started starring in pre-transition, and over the course of his transition, the character also transitioned in universe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay. I
yeah,
had no
yeah.
idea.
And I thought that Nolan's choice that, like, I'm a person that likes to work with my actors over and over again. Cillian Murphy, Tom Hardy, Robert Pattinson, etc., etc. Matt Damon. I want to work with you again, Elliot. Something has changed in your life since the last time we worked together. I am not going to disregard your what makes your own identity unique as I'm making this film about masculinity. And the character I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to write, because Sinon is an invention for this film. Sinon doesn't exist as this character in the Odyssey. Is going to be an
No, it comes from the
important,
Enid, I believe.
yeah, is going to be an important character in our protagonist's journey and the lessons that our hero and our audience needs to learn. But the fact that you are a man that doesn't look like the rest of the men in this cast is not going to be hand waved either. I actually thought there was something interesting about
Mm-hmm.
that. Now, I still do worry about the idea of putting people that belong to marginalized communities at the front line of just like this deplorable, evil, hateful internet mob that you know is going to
Yeah.
come at them without any form of like protection. But I also think probably this is a conversation that was had in the process of casting. That there's going to be a reaction to this. How do you feel? Do you want to do it? Do you not want to do it? So I don't know. I think Sinon as a character that represents young boys or boys that are perceived as weaker being played by a trans man. I think there's something kind of interesting and cool about it. And I just generally enjoyed Elliot's performance. And Elliot, and many people drag Odysseus in this film, but Sinon's dragging of Odysseus is like is the most
It's brilliant in
brutal one.
Hades.
Who's looking after your wife and son?
Tearing
Mm-hmm.
Odysseus apart from head to toe. I don't love how they conclude
Mm-hmm.
that arc. I think when Odysseus finally kills Atinoclus or whatever he's called, Robert Pattinson's character is like, "This is a message from the bravest man I ever knew." I thought it was a bit too cheesy, but I understood what they were trying to do, and like overall the arc worked on me, and I was very worried about that arc because I was so uneasy with how toxic the discourse about this character had become.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I like about masculinity in the film is, even though I think it's a bit clunkily delivered in terms of dialogue, the decision for Odysseus to exile himself, if you're reading that ending that way, to me is making a very important point about war criminals. And the idea that if you are a war criminal and you have done thoroughly unspeakable things to humanity and your fellow human and to innocents, regardless of whether or not you have repented for your actions, you no longer deserve to lead. The way you make your penance in society, or the way you make amends for your actions, should not involve you leading society, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Now in this case, the action of choice is to self-exile. But either way, I just think what is interesting about it is the idea of a man, a very powerful and strong man, who is respected still by many members of the society, understanding that he has committed an act that is borderline unforgivable and a stain on mankind, and understanding then I need to abdicate my position of power. I should not set an example for other people, even though I regret my actions. And the reason this is really important to me right now, as a person that is living in a country where the legacy of our president is a bunch of dictators, drug dealers, and war criminals from civil wars who continue to not have any consequences for their actions, borderline don't even accept what they've done, but people continue to reward them with positions of power, and then everybody is shocked that no progress is made. I'm like, yeah, like I think people need to be introduced to that concept that one important thing you need to do is that you don't reward war criminals with more power, even if quote unquote they're sorry.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's a very radical
It's a radical concept, yeah,
to make.
I don't think it's executed very well though. I'm not sure. It's a bit clunky in how it's done at the end. It's a bit rushed.
But I think the reason why I do think Christopher Nolan was aligned with that is just because it is so drastically different from the ending in the poem,
Yes.
in a way that is necessarily deliberate, right? So
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I get that. I did have a comment I wanted to make about consumption and male entitlement. I actually have a question rather to start this. You know how during Cersei's film, right? And again, the sound editing does so much work there, where we see the men being really gross, just shoving food down their throats, right? And of course, it's an analogy for what Cersei believes is male entitlement and how they constantly take. I think she even says that explicitly. What I find interesting is towards the end of the film, we actually get a repeat of that type of sound editing in Odysseus' home. Now, people have long drawn analogies to the entitlement of the suitors and the entitlement of the Greeks themselves when they're going to sack Troy, for example. But my question is, especially with the way how the film ends, does Odysseus become like a man hater towards the end? It kind of gives me the vibes that he's fully rejected all of the ideals of masculinity. Actually,
you think he's a misandrist now?
He's a misandrist and he's run off with his woman. I know some men who are like that, by the way, who they don't mess with other men because they're just over it. What was your thought about that?
And he's discussed as seeing the suitors and the way they're conducting themselves.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you're all awful, you're all terrible, that my entire gender is doomed.
Literally.
Let's leave it to my little boy. Let's see if there's any hope for him. Well,
that part is not
good
believable.
luck to all of you.
I've seen some people say that he's a commentary on like non-toxic masculinity. And so that reinforces the belief about like, if Christopher Nolan is essentially putting masculinity on trial, which I genuinely believe that's what the film is doing. But by putting Telemachus as the leader of Ithaca now, and as to your previous point, distorting the power away from the warlords, away from the violent men, away from the toxic men, and giving it to Telemachus, who's non-violent because frankly he cannot fight. That is an interesting comment to make as well, and also a brave comment to make, I would say, for Nolan.
I think Nolan's thematic ideas in this film are somewhat radical for a straight white man from the West with a lot of money and a lot of power.
I just don't think he executes it very well. That's the reason why I'm just like, they're minor points for me.
I think another interesting thing about that is the fact that Nolan is fundamentally somewhat conservative. And I don't mean it in the sense that like he's like partisan conservative, like Republican or the Conservative Party. I just mean like small C conservative in like the general ideals of family and nationhood and right and wrong and all of that.
These films
are
very heteronormative as well.
Yes,
so,
very, 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 very cis heteronormative. Another thing I was thinking about watching this film, I was like, I mean, I didn't expect much, but you are making an R-rated film about Greek people in 2026 and there is no visible queerness at all. Okay, sure.
Again, it's very, very suspect. I will say the shot of the guy who gets shot as a deer, basically, when Odysseus is on Circe's island. That
was kind of homoerotic.
Shot was giving, giving homoeroticism. So maybe that's a nod to it. I don't know.
What a nod. So yeah, like he's fundamentally like somewhat conservative in his storytelling. Like from Tenet onwards, though, he has tended towards like a certain kind of like white liberalism, and then like with this film, borderline is still wrapped up in conservative ideals, like in the sense that a man must go back and take back his home and find his wife and teach his son to be a man and blah 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 blah, have good values, like just basic traditional family value stuff. But like you said, at the end, he borderline becomes a separatist misandrist.
He's a separatist, literally. I was quite surprised by that.
So there's something that, let's see how it evolves over his next couple of films. Maybe by the time Nolan is in his 60s and 70s, he would have started making like second wave radical feminist films. Let's talk about the acting in this film and the ranking, because this is a freaking stacked cast. Like, it is an insanely stacked cast. Every time I think about it, I'm like, wow. Even like the small bit parts are still so much recognizable people. It is kind of wild. This is not everybody. This is not an exhaustive list because the cast is so insane. But this is about like the top 16, 17 cast members. So if I were to arrange the main people in order, it would be Samantha Morton number 1, Elliot Page number 2, John Leguizamo number 3, Matt Damon number 4, Lupita Nyong'o number 5, Anne Hathaway number 6, Robert Pattinson number 7, Himesh Patel number 8, Benny Safdie number 9, Zendaya number 10, Tom Holland number 11, Corey Hawkins number 12, Charlize Theron number 13, Mia Goth number 14, and John Brennan number 15 at the bottom.
He deserves
I'll just summarize the top. The top for me: Samantha Morton, Elliot Page, John Leguizamo, Matt Damon, and Lupita Nyong'o. The reason they are my top is I don't even think there's like I think any of them are strongly better than others, like wildly. But most people are competent in this film. Like, the actors all took their job seriously. But Samantha Morton, everybody has talked about how excellent and how serious she takes her performance. Elliot genuinely just like emotionally moved me quite a lot. So like I just liked it. John Leguizamo, I have some problems with the flow of how that character is used in the story. Okay. But I think the actor was having fun with it and also putting a lot of heart into it. And Matt Damon is just like Matt Damon. He's just like so rootable. I thought for the first half of the movie, he was basically doing like service acting, just like autopilot Matt Damon movie star acting. But from the siren scene onwards, I saw glimpses of like excellence from him. And then Lupita, she was there too little, but I actually kind of enjoyed like the rage that was shimmering under her. The reason people like Robert Pattinson and Anne Hathaway and Himesh Patel, who have been like praised a lot by a lot of people, are not at my top, is because I just feel Robert was just a bit too cartoonish. Get the shields, get the swords at the end. And Anne Hathaway, I liked the moments where she needed to wow out, but some other parts I felt like the tonal modulation just wasn't there. And Himesh Patel, I just fundamentally don't like how that character's story arc is wrapped. Then at the bottom of the list, the reason I have Corey Hawkins, Charlize Theron, Mia Goth, and John Brennan here is because all of them were giving directorless performances. Each person was in their own silo doing whatever they wanted to do. Charlize just didn't put any effort at all. Corey Hawkins thought he was in some kind of teen drama. Mia Goth, I think she's a very great actress, but in this film, she was just doing underutilized. And John Brennan, I mean, I'll just leave that
ridiculous.
To you to discuss.
Absolutely
Zendaya
ridiculous.
and Tom Holland are just in the middle for me. This is better than what I've seen either of them do in most feature films, but you know, their bar is quite low. So, and I liked Zendaya's performance in the Athena priestess beheading reveal scene. I thought she was good. In the moment where they show her face as she's about to be beheaded, I thought she was good. The rest of the time where she's representing the conscience of Odysseus, it doesn't really work for me because she and Matt Damon don't really have much chemistry. And I don't mean romantic chemistry, I just mean chemistry.
Exactly.
In that she's supposed to represent kind of his own mind. And I don't feel that. And she's just kind of doing service walking around with him. So like it's okay, it's not horrible, but it's not particularly good. Tom Holland, he had one or two moments I thought was good. The moment when he realizes his dad is his dad, it's not excellent, but there's a little bit of like tearing up he does that I thought was okay. And also when the suitors are bullying the beggar and he just jumps up and he's like, enough.
Yeah, that was the one good moment from him.
I actually thought he the gravitas that he needed for that scene, he actually tapped into it.
He did, yeah.
I don't know where he got that from because it was absent everywhere else.
But it's supposed to. This is one thing I'll say.
So it's supposed to be absent in that he's not supposed to have bass in his tone. But what I mean is like, you can play a character that is not supposed to be loud or strong and yet still hold the attention of the audience. Like, a very skilled actor can do that. He's not that. He's not quite that. You're going to hate when I say this, but Timothée Chalamet can do that. He can play someone who is like Weasley or rodent-like or weak and yet still play them with charisma at the same time, if that makes sense.
So we're actually quite aligned on our top 5. So my top 5, well, in order actually, Samantha Morton as Cersei, she dominated the film and she was the only person, or the person who made me feel the most. Like, I literally felt her pain. I liked Robert Pattinson as Antinous. Yes, he was a camp villain, but I think, remember, it's a blockbuster film. That ending fight didn't have any urgency without him. Like, he was the only one bringing that chaotic energy for me to remember that Odysseus is about to die if he doesn't kill all of these men.
Get the shields!
Yes, get the shields, finish this, period. So I liked it personally, but I understand why some people might not like it. John Leguizamo as Eumaeus, again, like that scene when he turns around and he's telling us about how Ithaca has fallen, really, really impacted me. And for some reason, it made me remember the way how my granddad used to speak and how he used to talk about how like England had changed or like even Jamaica had changed, and the pain that you hear from these older men when they talk about how much change they've seen and maybe how they feel out of place now. I really felt that, which to me is a sign that the performance worked really, really well on me.
Do you think maybe that character should have been played by a blind person though? Or a person that's visually impaired? I was thinking about this when I was watching the film, because this film is so star-studded. I almost think it's a fault to the film sometimes that like the cast is almost distracting. Every single person is a famous actor in this film, including the small roles. In a way that kind of pulls me out of the world sometimes. And I was thinking that, like, a world where, yeah, we still have our big movie stars as the main leads, but they cast some more subtle character actors as some of these supporting roles, would that have brought more, like, seriousness to the story that's being told here? I don't know.
I think, especially in the case of Eumaeus, John Leguizamo, he delivers that for me. I will say that, like, Nolan has enough power now that he could have cast like actors that aren't as prolific as this and gotten away with it. He definitely could have. And I think probably by him choosing such a star-studded cast, it was probably him over maybe being a bit too risk-averse. The film was always going to do well. You didn't need to go and get bloody... Like, literally, I'm looking at this cast. You have to go 4 lines down before you start seeing actors who you don't recognize like as household names. So I get you. My other top 2 are Elliot Page and Anne Hathaway. Matt Damon doesn't get into my top 5.
Hater.
And the reason why, let me tell you the reason why, right? I'm not saying he's bad, he's good. But, one, I look at him and I immediately see a Scottish man. I clock him immediately.
I even thought you were going to say American man, not a Scottish man.
No. He look, literally, if you go down the streets in Edinburgh, certain places, that you're going to see a man like him. Only things they're a bit taller. So...
Oh my God.
I see the Scottish immediately, so that takes me out of the film.
Scottish is crazy.
In his defense, his physique is important for this film. It's necessary. It's not just for the girls. It's important.
So he wasn't giving you Turkish Cypriot, Greek Cypriot like Boris Johnson. If they were serious, they should have cast Boris Johnson in
It's
this
true.
film.
See, that goes to show you another reason why this argument about cast the Greeks doesn't even make any damn sense in the modern day.
Very.
The big problem I have with Matt Damon's performance is he's able to convince me that he's Odysseus when he's portraying the more egotistical elements of Odysseus' character. So when we're on the scene, on the way to the sirens, and he's got this smirk on his face and he's saying, "Oh no, I don't need to put wax in my ears. I want to hear it. Strap me up." That I was right there with him. But he fails to convince me that he's the cunning Odysseus of the poem. This is where he loses me. I don't buy it.
Is that a failure for him, or is that a directorial choice from Nolan? That I think Nolan is not interested in portraying this Odysseus as cunning.
I get it. But like the writing does give him the opportunity, as you alluded to earlier, even that you saw the cunning when it comes to Cersei. But for example, do you know who I was thinking about when I was watching his performance? Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer.
You believe he's a genius?
I believe, like, you know, when you see these like tortured genius characters and you can see them literally calculating in their head, right? I didn't get any of that with Odysseus, and it was a problem. But
no shade. And I love Matt Damon, but Cillian Murphy and Matt Damon are not in the same tier of acting.
But he's
Cillian Murphy is an actor. But that's the thing. Cillian Murphy, this movie is going to make more than Oppenheimer. So like what you demand of these two actors is two different things. Cillian Murphy, there's certain things about the physicality of action hero-ness that Matt Damon can deliver that Cillian Murphy is not his skill. It's not his skill. Whereas Cillian Murphy, the like interiority of deeply, deeply tortured and complex individuals is something that he's been known how to do. And Matt Damon is one by one that he's learning how to do.
You're saying that we have to choose, basically. You have to pick the physical actor or you have to pick the intellectual actor.
Is there anyone who can
do both?
There's one actor that can do both. There's also a Nolan leading man who is Christian Bale. Christian Bale got buff as fuck for Batman, but also he's a very, very deeply cerebral, very, very serious method actor at that, right? I was thinking about it. Why didn't he cast Christian Bale as Odysseus? I think, honestly, the Christian Bale Odyssey would have been too dark for what Nolan was trying to do. Like Christian Bale would turn this whole thing into like a misery fest, whereas Matt Damon is able to play this character as a deeply self-pitying person and yet still keep the popcorn funness of it at the same time. So I think it's about what Nolan was calculating about what he was trying to accomplish with this film. I also thought about some of his other leading men, like Leonardo DiCaprio can definitely play the psychologically fucked up husband thing very well if he wants to. But DiCaprio has never been an action leading buff man, especially not right now. I mean, I guess you could challenge him to see if he could do it, but it's not what he normally does.
It's risky.
Yeah, another person is Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy definitely can play the action buff hero, and he can somewhat play emotional characters, but he's not as serious as a Cillian Murphy or Christian Bale. So like I think he looked at all of his guys. Then Matthew McConaughey as well. I don't know if I could ever believe Matthew McConaughey as any kind of Greek hero because he's just so Southern American man to me. So I think he weighed all of his options. I said, you know what, Matt Damon is the right himbo for this moment.
If you put it that way, I kind of understand it, but it's still, his performance took me out of the film too many times for me to put him in my top 5.
It was making you think about Glasgow.
my bottom, I don't have a bottom 5, but I do have a bottom 2.
You're about to drug this boy again.
John Bernthal. But yeah, what the hell was going on? What was going on? He ruined the film. And the irony of it is he looks the most Greek out of all of them.
He does look the most Greek.
He looks the most Greek.
He literally looks Spartan. I was thinking that
and he ruined it.
He looked the part, but this bald cap they put on him wasn't working. If they made Matt Damon grow out that beard, why couldn't they force John to shave that head?
I don't know why. It's almost like he's acting like he's in the casino or something, like a casino film. Like, I don't know what the hell was going on. But every time he was on screen, I jumped out of the film. I was done.
So it's a whole thing. It's known with him that he always played the same character. He played the same character in The Walking Dead.
But there's a time and a place.
There's a time. He said
that was the time.
Greece is also the time and the place. It's the same time of this. Now, I will play devil's advocate. I don't hate his performance. Even though he's the bottom of my list, I still don't hate his performance as much as everybody does. It's a testament to the fact that, like, to me, nobody in this film is truly horrible. So even though he's in the bottom of my list, it's not like complete, like a trash heap of a performance. It's just like a very unserious performance. There is a moment in like the final scenes you see with him where he's showing a bit of kindness, softness, and a bit of paternal instinct towards Tom Holland, that I actually thought there was actually a gentleness that was interesting, but it wasn't, in no way did he actually dominate the otherwise he looks like somebody you bump into in the bodega.
Ridiculous.
in New York. He looks like he just came off the F train to me. Now,
Ridiculous.
I do think with this critique I have of him and the other people who I thought were questionable in this film, though, I laid this critique at the feet of Christopher Nolan. I saw someone say something that has been lingering in my head, which is that Christopher Nolan has never been an actor's director. And I was like, that is completely correct. There are certain kinds of directors that as they enter their sets, the first thing in the forefront of their mind is, what performance am I going to get out of my cast? How am I going to get them to move their brows to deliver these lines? How many takes do I want them to do? Blah, blah. And then I'll think about everything else after. Nolan, the first thing he's thinking about is this IMAX camera that's 150 kilograms that we're going to put on top of this ship.
He's into the technicals.
How are we going to reduce the volume for it? This gigantic puppet that's going to play the Cyclops, who is going to be holding the wiring of this and that and that? And then by the time we pull out into the focus of this, how are we going to capture the swirling? That is his first thing he's thinking about. And then after the fact, he's like, oh yeah, John Brennan is doing a bit of a weird thing over there. Well, we'll be
Robert
fine.
Pattinson is camp. Matt Damon is not showing Connie.
He's not.
Who cares?
Yes. Yeah. Who cares? As long as they're throwing the shields from the hole in the ceiling and my IMAX camera is capturing it, that's my priority. So he's not an actor's director in that sense. He has gotten legendary performances from actors sometimes, like Heath Ledger as Joker, but that is an actor-driven action, not a director-driven action, because the rest of the cast in Dark Knight is not really matching that energy from Heath Ledger. So I came to understand that. So in a way, these actors who are so excited to get this opportunity, Nolan is doing a bit of a disservice to them in this film, because he's not directing them with a strict or consolidated hand. He's letting them do what each of them wants to do, and he's leaving them to the winds a bit. So that's why you are getting...
And sometimes it goes really well with Samantha Morton as Cersei, but sometimes it's disastrous with John Bernthal as mafia boss Menelaus.
Empty. Charlize was calling and begging for a director to tell her what he wants from her in this film. Right? And he did not give that to her. He just said, just do what you want to do. So Charlize just coasted right through it, pun intended. So, and a serious director will see what John Bernthal is doing here and be like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, pattern
You're Greek.
You're...
Remember, you're Greek.
A director that is interested in being an actor's director will watch Zendaya and Matt Damon and be like, wait, stop. We're retaking this scene. You too need to remember that this girl is literally a projection of your soul and your mind. I need you to capture that energy and give that to me. Do it again. Do it again. Instead, I think they said in the press run that he told Zendaya that she was the only person in the film that he thought was perfect.
Absolute joke. Rubbish. When? What show? I want to know. The only person who was perfect was Samantha Morton. So
I'm like, yeah, he's not a director that is that obsessed with the acting. To him, it's like, I have movie stars in my film. They're all professionals. There's a certain level below which they are not going to drop, and that's okay with me.
My final bad actor, I already said it. I'm going to be brief. It's Tom Holland. And I will say, I've seen a lot of critiques saying that he started off badly and then he got better. And I think the people who are saying that, I think maybe they don't understand who Telemachus is. Like, Telemachus is not supposed to be domineering or anything like that. And he's especially supposed to be weak and, like, you know, a side character in the beginning. But for me, Tom Holland's bad acting really comes about with that reunification. Remember that the whole film relies on him to deliver that scene. Because remember, we can't have Matt Damon running and kissing his son. We can't have that because he's in disguise. Argus, the poor dog, that dog is not up to scratch either. In fact, that dog is one of my bad actors as well. They should have got the dog from Anatomy of a Fall.
I agree. That dog wasn't giving what it was supposed to give. That dog did not behave like it was 20 years old.
But that means that the one person who we're expecting to bear the entire emotional weight of the film is Tom Holland. And does he deliver? No. I felt exactly nothing.
The internet has dragged him enough. It's okay now.
And that's it for me.
He tried his best.
I wasn't impressed. No.
He tried his best.
Go back to being Spider-Man, whatever it is. You're not ready yet. But I hope the check cleared.
I find it funny that he didn't share any scenes with his wife, especially because Telemachus and Athena share lots of scenes in the text. And that's how I knew that in this world, the gods don't exist.
Yeah.
Let's do a quick who made this with Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is basically, in my opinion, now the most powerful director in the world, and maybe one of the most powerful film directors of all time. Maybe the most powerful director of all time, in that he's now a person that it is essentially guaranteed that no matter what he puts in front of an audience, is going to make $1 billion, and he can get all the studios in the world to give him whatever he wants. He can get all the biggest Hollywood actors in the world to want to be on his set, and he can get all the audiences of the world to come out and spend premium pricing to watch his film in the format he wants. So
people are flying internationally to try and watch this film in the intended format. That's how serious it is.
It's very serious. It's sold out BFI IMAX for 2 months from this date.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very, he's and it cannot be overstated how powerful a filmmaker he has become. He is the movie star of this film. There have been surveys that showed that the majority of audiences are watching this film more for him than any individual cast member, which Hollywood has been turning in this direction for a while now, like the concept of the auteur being the draw of the film. Something similar happened with Ryan Coogler last year, but this is the more, like, this is it at the highest we've ever seen it before. So let's talk about who Nolan is, his power. He's also the head of the Directors Guild of America. His power and the stories he tends to tell now. I have a hot take that this obsession that he increasingly has with the idea of these men that have too much power and how that little power they can have can turn this whole world upside down and destroy the fabric of the planet as we know it, is like a reflection of himself. He's the most powerful director in the world right now, arguably the most powerful director that has ever existed, maybe more than Steven Spielberg. So he feels great power in his fingertips, and I think there is like, he's processing that, and that is why he keeps on reiterating the same point. He's done it 3 times now in a row.
He's basically told us the same story multiple times now of this man who has some sort of power or skill, and he's very much like guilt-ridden because of it. And importantly, he spends a lot of time from his family because of it. But my critique on top of that is that, but he never stops doing whatever it is that's taking him away from his family. So that's the part that I find boring.
And that's why he keeps telling the same
He keeps
story
making the same film again, which is funny.
because he still hasn't addressed it in his own life.
But for me, it's obviously you have Oppenheimer, obvious one, Inception, Interstellar.
I think you can even say Tenet.
Yeah, Tenet, exactly. Multiple times you're going to tell us the same story. And like, I get what you're saying, that there's a meta point here, right? But here's my question, right? There's 2 elements to it. And I think we should talk about the family and the wife aspect after. But the first element, let's talk about the like tortured scientist, tortured artist, right? What exactly is Nolan guilty about? Because Oppenheimer is guilty about his bomb. Odysseus is guilty about his Trojan horse. Dominic Cobb is guilty about creating Inception on his wife. Is Nolan guilty about his filmography? That's the only thing I can think.
I think he has a complicated relationship with the concept of the blockbuster giga film, especially the superhero films, as he has made them. And don't also forget a very important thing that happened is after The Dark Knight, I think it was around the release of The Dark Knight Rises, the Joker shooting happened, where a guy dressed up as Joker went up to a cinema and shot up the cinema and killed 12 people in 2012, Aurora Theatres shooting. And that's something that would really fuck with. And at the same time, that this was soon after, you know, Nolan had won a bunch of Oscars for Dark Knight. Heath Ledger won. So I'm not saying that's the one thing that he's been talking about this whole time, but I think
maybe he's recognized his power.
Yes, the Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, were a turning point in the idea of successfully pulling off a quote-unquote serious superhero film, serious enough that is winning Oscars, that is also a huge commercial success, like making $1 billion. If I'm not mistaken, till today, Dark Knight Rises is still Nolan's highest grossing film. Huge commercial success that also then spawned an extreme act of violence. And also launched a bunch of incel culture as well. I'm not saying that Nolan invented incel culture, of course. But the Bane and the Joker memes and 4chan of it all is tied to those worlds. So I think there's probably some real like feeling disturbed with himself that's associated with that, and yet he still keeps on making these
That's
films.
what I'm
right?
saying.
He still makes, because you think about it, if you were him, would you not? Like,
No,
you
that's
get
fine,
paid
but then
a
no,
lot
but
of money.
wait. I get that, but at the same time, it's becoming like an infinite loop. So you're making so much money off of this stuff, and then you keep creating films about how you're making so much money off of these things, and it's a problem, but you're gonna keep doing it. Like, my thing is this: I don't mind people making questionable, morally grey decisions under capitalism. I understand it. Capitalism is a harsh system, but at the same time, like, I'm pretty sure he has enough money now. And what I find interesting is he's very chronically offline, by the way. If he wanted to
Yes.
go off grid, I'm sure he's probably one of the best placed people to do that. So if he wanted to just go on off grid with his wife, literally like Odysseus and his wife go off into the sunset, they could do that if they want to. He's still making films because he wants to do that. So I'm like, you keep talking about this like guilt-ridden man. Are you really that guilt-ridden though? Because you're gonna come back again in a few years and make another $1 billion, and guess what? I'm gonna be in that cinema as well.
We're gonna be there watching. We're going to eat it up,
right? So I get the vibe that he's guilty about something. I wondered if it was just like maybe he felt like he's fundamentally changed the film industry forever, and he's not sure what that means now. And I think that's an interesting question, because even if you think about the budget for the Odyssey, right? How many films could be made with that? Right? And look how much money has been made here. If you're the investor, you've got the choice of betting on Christopher Nolan, who's basically a guaranteed win, or betting on a more like independent artist who we know Christopher Nolan has a lot of respect for as well. So maybe that's where it's coming from as well. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I remember listening to an interview where Eva Victor, who made Sorry Baby last year, talked about when she got her DGA nomination, her phone just rang and she picked up the phone and it was Christopher Nolan, because apparently he, as the head of the DGA, and he takes it upon himself to call every single director that ever gets any kind of nomination or attention, to speak to them, to wish them good luck, to offer them counsel, to congratulate them. Nolan's, OG beginnings are very humble. I think his first film following had a budget of like $6,000, which even for a small film is unusually
it's very small. Yeah.
Even Memento, I think, is just like a handful of $1 million, and then his budgets have exploded ever since, just as Hollywood budgets have exploded. I've ever told you my conspiracy theory about the money laundering going on with blockbuster film budgets. That's a whole other conversation. So, but at his heart, he still has those like auteur beginnings, right? A person that could pull off a film with a $6,000 budget clearly like knows how to do like scrappy filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I actually saw Matt Damon talking about how he still has that element of it to him sometimes. Like, for example, with filming the Trojan horse scene, the interiors, which, by the way, I thought that was some very great physical photography, because they shot all of that with the actors actually inside that horse. Wow. None of that is in a soundstage. None of that is in some kind of buggy that they set up or any fake thing. No. Both the external and the internal shots that we're seeing are of Matt Damon and John Bertnell and all of them inside the horse. They're all in it, like, for real. And apparently when it was time to start prepping for that scene, Matt Damon was like, exactly where is the camera going to sit? Like, what are we going to do here? And Nolan was like, don't really know. We'll figure it out when we get there. And he was like, okay, that he still sees that he still sometimes has that spirit of, we'll figure it out with whatever resources we have, of an indie filmmaker. So he probably, and again, that for Eva Victor to explain that, how shocked she was by how genuinely interested he was by how she approached her filmmaking as like a young up-and-comer. Their filmmaking as a young up-and-coming filmmaker. I think there's still something about him that probably like idealizes the idea of the scrappy indie budget filmmaker, and maybe perhaps has some degree of self-loathing or guilt for what a spectacle he has turned large-scale filmmaking into, whilst at the same time, of course, still enjoying the idea that he gets to stretch the imagination of what filmmaking can be. With each of these films he's making now, he's pushing and pushing and pushing the limit of just how big you can make a film. Like, this film is the first one in history shot entirely on IMAX. There are some technical problems and flaws in the film that causes, by the way, but he has now stretched our imagination of what that looks like. Before, we didn't know what it looked like. Now we do, including the problems it causes. So I think as like a technical filmmaker, that is an interesting concept with him. So he's wrestling with these two sides of his soul.
Then there's the other aspect, which is the emotional side, right? Because again, with these same stories that he keeps spitting out now, you also have this story about like, oh, I'm being taken away from my family because of my duty, whether that's because I'm a scientist in Oppenheimer or because Dominic Cobb is actually like on the run because of his Inception stuff. Obviously, Odysseus is on his way home. And as I've alluded to, a lot of my issues with this film are due to what I consider to be a lack of emotion. Like, it almost feels like if I didn't know who made this film, I would be convinced that this is someone who strongly desires to have romantic love, but they have never experienced it. So the fact that this is made by somebody who's not only married, but like has been married, seems to be very tied to his wife. And if I'm to believe what
And
he's
she
communicating
works
for
with
his
him in
films,
all
yeah,
the
she works with
films.
him,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, why did he fail to convey that love I assume that he has for his wife and his family? Why did that not come across in this film? It was a big problem for me.
I don't think Nolan has ever successfully conveyed romantic love to me in any of his films. And in fact,
Why
that's
is
the
that?
challenge. That's the challenge out because Nolan makes films for the boys. He's even though he's clearly evolving his position on gender and stuff like that, he's fundamentally like his fallback is like boy cinema. I don't really know how to explain it. Like,
but if I didn't know who made this film, I'd assume this is a man that has never known romantic love. So I'm just really struggling to connect those two things.
There's a romantic, borderline asexual tone to some of his films, to a lot of his films. And
including this one.
In fact, someone was saying to me that what next is Nolan going to do, and apart from my just like stand on me saying that his next film he needs to make Timothée Chalamet the lead of his film. But apart from that, I was like, if he wants to challenge himself, he needs to make a romance film. I want to see what that looks like from him. It could be a straight romance, it could be a queer romance, it could be between older people, it could be between younger people, I don't care. But I want it to center love. And I want to see, not just, a man pining for his wife that is far away. No. The two characters are ingrained in the story. He's following them. Or it could be more than two. I don't know, polyamorous, whatever. Characters. And he's following their love in a way that is just like a character study on love, the emotion, romantic love. And present it to me. I want to see it.
But this is what I'm saying. That was the Odyssey. If you interpret, no, I'm being so serious. If you interpret the poem in the favorable way, so if you're not looking at it from like a feminist lens and thinking that Odysseus is basically just trying to control his wife's sexuality, that means that you're interpreting Odysseus as the ultimate lover boy. He's the ultimate yearner. What do you mean he's telling the goddess that, you're better looking than my wife, but I still want my Penelope because she's my intellectual equal? What? That is romance. So to see him take on this film, and I didn't get any of that. I didn't get any of that yearning. Odysseus should have been crying on that beach.
Let me tell you what he needs to do. He needs to get someone else to write the script. He needs a real lover boy or girl or them to write the script. And then on top of that, he arguably, I wouldn't say he needs a co-director, but he needs something that he needs to maybe lean heavily into his first AD or his unit director. He needs to let go of his attachments to the technical side of directing. So that he can focus.
He probably doesn't want to
He doesn't want to because that's not really what he's interested in. But if he wants to stretch himself, this man has already proved himself commercially 1 billion times over. He can do whatever he wants. So if he really wants to push himself and see what can I do? How can I stretch myself? He needs to treat this as an experiment. Let go of that. At this point, he has frequent collaborators that have made so many of these films with him. They can handle it. Let that person deal with it. And you sit down with that script. Sit down with your script writer, your screenplay writer. Thoroughly internalize it. Sit down with your cast. Thoroughly get on the same page and draw out true emotion from them. It'll be something very interesting. It's not going to happen, but it would be really cool to see.
But it's not even just the directing, because like even some of the choices to remove elements. So for example, one of the things that I didn't bring up earlier actually is in the underworld scene, Nolan for some reason decides to cut when Odysseus meets his mother. It's one of the most important points of the underworld.
I was thinking about
because that is when Odysseus realizes the consequences of being away from home for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why did Nolan decide to cut that? It's so,
the film was almost 3 hours long and he was just trying to strip down the things he considered superfluous. But that is not superfluous. But
it's not superfluous.
But if you're a boy director,
But I'm just saying it to bring up the point that it's not even just about the romantic love. It's also even like other forms of love that this man is really, really struggling to communicate. Even though on the outside, he seems like the ultimate lover boy. He is a wealthy, like you said, one of the most successful, if not the most successful director in Hollywood, right? He's obviously a very financially successful man, and he's still been married to the same woman for years and years and years. Obviously, we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but whether you like it or not, that is still, on the outside at least, a very romantic thing to do. So I'm like, you're the lover boy, but you can't portray that in your films. Why?
The people that know the roots here of what's going on, they one day they'll explain it to us. How would you rank the Odyssey in Nolan's filmography?
It's tough. I'm still sitting with it,
Same.
I'm still sitting with it.
I need to watch
It's
the
probably
film
low
again.
down for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to watch the film again. My favorite Nolan films are Interstellar and Prestige. I swap around the two of them. This is not close to touching either of their crowns. Like, there's a huge gulf between those two films and the rest of Nolan films for me. I also like The Dark Knight Rises a lot because I love Tom Hardy. So and I like Cillian Murphy in Oppenheimer, but I don't necessarily know that I like that film itself that much. But I love Cillian Murphy in that film.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I were to rank, I would always have Interstellar, Prestige, top two. Quite a bit of a gap. Then The Dark Knight Rises. Then right underneath that, I would put The Odyssey, and Oppenheimer side by side. I need to watch The Odyssey again. If I watch it again and I'm like, the things I like about it are more important to me than the things I dislike, I might actually bump it up above Oppenheimer. Because if you put both films in front of me right now and gave me 3 hours in a cinema and said, which one would you rather watch? I would pick The Odyssey because I find it to be more like
The Odyssey.
Consumable film to watch, if that makes sense.
It's very easy to watch.
It's very easy to watch.
Yeah. Oppenheimer, the first time I watched it, I fell asleep. And I'm literally a scientist. Like,
I have a serious problem with the third act of Oppenheimer. I do not give a single damn about any of those black and white Senate hearings happening with Robert Downey Jr. And I think it's a travesty he won an Oscar for that.
Okay, this is our Is It Really That Deep segment. So we asked our listeners and audience if they had any hot takes about the film. So we're going to go through one of those that we received and let you know what we think about it. The first comment is from Janice. Janice says he really enjoyed the film, but we're really interested in what he said about his predictions for the Academy Awards. He says, my prediction is that the film will emerge as one of the major winners at the Academy Awards, with victories in several categories, including Best Actor, Best Actress, possibly Best Supporting Actor or Actress, Best Cinematography, Best Sound, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Director. You're the resident Oscars predictions queen. Tell us what you think.
I'm raising my eyebrows at some of these categories from like a personal standpoint, but from like an industry standpoint, I don't think it's actually that off in terms of definitely nominations, because we're now more than halfway into this year and there's no major film yet that has emerged as a very serious Academy contender. Dune 3, I think, might become that.
You're going to piss the people off. You know that those people like Project Hail Mary.
Please be serious. Please be.
Whether you like it or not, people like that film. I don't.
I even thought you were going to say some more interesting niche indie thing, and then you tell me Project Hail Mary.
Project Hail Mary.
Let's be serious. If it's between The Odyssey and Project Hail Mary, The Odyssey is going to outdo it. Now, Dune 3 could be like the blockbuster that like blocks The Odyssey, depending on how well it's received. I think it's going to be received pretty well, but the Academy in the past hasn't rewarded Denny yet and hasn't given an Oscar to Timothée Chalamet. But I do think the narrative that is building around Dune 3 is that like this is one that everybody is very seriously anticipating as the final part of the story. So in the war of the blockbuster epics, I think there's going to be a bit of an Odyssey Dune 3 face-off.
Yeah,
the other big blockbusters that are coming out, Avengers, nobody's going to care about that. Disclosure Day was not a serious film. Supergirl, Spider-Man, they're not going to be serious critical favorites. Werewolf, I think they snubbed Robert Eggers last time, but this one could potentially, depending on how it's received, could also be an interesting conversation. And then there's also the smaller films that are getting lots of attention, like The Invite and things like that. But
Fjord as well.
I don't. Yeah, Fjord, exactly. There's also the Cannes films and the festival films. There might also even be some love for like these surprise YouTube films like Backrooms and things like that. Especially
Obsession for sure.
If not for wins, but definitely maybe for nominations, especially in the technical department. But in terms of the big films and the big categories, Nolan, expect him to sweep the nomination. This film has been received much better by critics than it has been received by you and me. And I hate to pat myself on the shoulder, but I did say that we are probably going to get this reaction leading with the formal critics, in that they will be so very much gagged by the technical prowess of this film that they would not be able to focus on the storytelling problems that's going on with Nolan. For the specific categories this guy said, he said best actor. I'm guessing he means lead actor. I do think Matt Damon is going to get a nomination, not because his performance is the greatest we've ever seen, but because I don't think there's actually that much competition. Timothy is almost certainly going to get a Dune 3 nomination as well. But nobody from Disclosure Day is getting a nomination. Robert Pattinson might get a nomination for his To Catch a Predator film, and maybe even from the drama, but I don't think there's that much competition that they're going to push Matt Damon away. And a lot of critics are saying, and I do mostly agree with them, that this is, believe it or not, this is Matt Damon's most like serious actor performance in a big film.
I can actually agree with that.
Yeah, Matt Damon is like usually very much like a popcorn action hero guy. I like him in Martian a lot, but I think critics were quite impressed by his performance for his standards. So I see him getting a nomination. Best actress, I think Anne Hathaway is going to get a nomination as well. Sure. Critics like it a lot. It's a very like Oscar-y performance, especially that scene where she's screaming at Tom Holland, saying, I want Odysseus. And bless his heart, she's throwing a Serena Williams volley at Tom Holland, and Tom Holland just cannot keep up. He cannot do it. He's just like...
He's the embodiment of Telemachus, but in real life.
He's just looking. He doesn't know what to do.
Gosh.
I was just like, oh, honey. And the thing is, Anne Hathaway is a good actress, but Anne Hathaway is not even Meryl Streep. You know, she's not Anthony Hopkins. She's not Denzel. If you can't keep up with Anne Hathaway, what hope do you have? Anyway. So I think she can get a nomination. I think Samantha Morton, if the studio of Universal really pushes for her, which I think they will, she's going to get a supporting actress nomination. She might even win it.
She needs to win.
Yeah. Best supporting actor, maybe John Bernthal.
No, stop the nonsense. Do you know what? You're gonna hate me.
Maybe John Leguizamo.
I'm just a girl, okay? Let me defend Benny Safdie real quick.
If you say Benny Safdie,
let me just defend it real quick. Because on the surface, you're like, okay, the armor's doing all the hard work. Yeah, kind of. But think about it. There's some physical acting that's really important there. He could have done it anyhow. But he's part of the reason why Agamemnon has so much aura.
You're weak at the knees. Get up. Stand up. Benny Safdie's performance in Oppenheimer is even more serious than whatever is going on in this film. You need to be serious. Best cinematography, I mean, Nolan, that's good. He's going to get that nomination no matter what. And the cinematography, in terms of the scale and the epicness of this film, I thought looked beautiful in IMAX. Now, I watched this film with a filmmaker who was watching the technicals of how this film looks as a film that was shot entirely in IMAX with a very critical eye. And he was dragging... So with filming in IMAX on IMAX cameras... Okay, so you clocked it as well. Filming in IMAX, first of all, you can only shoot for 3 minutes at a time because the machine gets overwhelmed. So that's why you have some weird editing and cuts. And another thing is that because of how I believe depth of field and the scale and what initially IMAX cameras were designed to shoot it is actually quite tricky to capture people in focus properly when they're close in this film. And you see that happen several times in this film, including in very important consequential scenes where an actor goes out of focus. And for a film of this scale, of this budget, of this level of scrutiny, something that looks so amateur shouldn't be happening. And we had a conversation about it, and I think the conclusion was just that they decided that because of how much Nolan wanted to be able to say that we filmed this whole thing in IMAX, they were willing to sacrifice the focus level of the filming, even in such crucial scenes. I think they said they shot 2 million feet of film for this, and they only used 52,000 for the final. So they discarded literally over 1 million feet of film. And these shots, including the blurry ones, are the best of them. So you can only imagine how many technical problems they were having. I've seen some people argue that this is why you actually just fundamentally should not shoot only on IMAX at the position the technology currently is at. It's just not where it's supposed to be.
Like, this is Christopher Nolan's hubris. This is his own hubris. And like another point on the cinematography is another reason why I never really got immersed in this film is that I understand that Odysseus is going into all of these different territories and different worlds, right? And they're naturally going to look different. But there's no defining visual language that takes me through the film. And this means that I don't feel like I'm in a cohesive project. It feels like I'm going through different segments. I'm literally like, okay, this is the Cersei segment. Okay, this is the Underworld segment.
Someone literally said that to me too. It's like a combination of scenes and set pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is
it didn't immerse me. I felt immersed in Inception.
You know, I'm an Inception hater, so I don't know. I can't really speak on that.
I will add to this comment, actually, Janice's comment, and say that I would like to see a nomination for Best Editing, because I literally watched this film Saturday and Sunday, back to back. I never felt tired. I could even watch it again tomorrow.
Yes.
And that's because of the editing.
Yeah. It's edited
not perfect,
well.
But it's edited well.
And it's a woman that edited it.
Yes, I'm aware.
It's edited well. And I think, again, it's a very Nolan-esque thing to show you the point I'm going to make at the end of the film by showing you shots of it at the beginning and throughout the film with the Athena head. I actually like the way it was done. And sometimes the cutting was like very like, but yet it still kind of compelled me. And you are very right that this film does not feel like an exhausting watch at any point. And that is not easy to do with a 3-hour running time.
Not at all.
Okay, this person also says best sound. Let's talk about sound and score. Sound, people always complain Nolan films are too noisy. Me, I had an excellent
I had no problem
with this film. So I liked the volume. I liked everything. Yeah. He has controlled it a lot better than the disastrous days of Tenet and not being able to hear Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. For the score, Ludwig has already won like 2 or 3 Oscars. He will definitely be nominated again this time. As a person that worships the Interstellar score, to me, I wasn't gagged.
Let me tell you why I like the score. So Nolan was actually really specific with his brief. He told Ludwig that he doesn't want him to use like a traditional orchestra because that's obviously too modern, right? So this is one of the ways that he's actually like respecting the Greek elements of the film for the score.
Why did he care about that for the music and nothing else? That's so strange.
I understand that point and I agree with it. But I'm like, listen, let's let the Greeks take the small crumbs, please. And I think that Ludwig does something really special and that there are times when the score really swells and it brings me into it. And I think the strongest example of that is the actual initial sacking of Troy. Again, the score is part of the reason why Agamemnon has so much aura as well.
Oh my God,
even if you take that out of it, I don't even know what instruments they're using, but there's something about it that feels really trippy and like hypnotic. And even though, bear in mind, I'm very pro-Trojan, I'm on the sides of the Trojans, but there's something about the music and the way how it like hypnotizes me that I feel like, yes, I want them to go and sack Troy as well. I'm literally on the side of the Greeks. And so I think it worked really, really well for me.
I think the sacking of Troy music, I agree, that works. And I also said one of my favorite scenes is when Odysseus holds onto the raft and heads home finally. I think where the music drops in that scene and it swells and it feels triumphant, it felt like what I was seeing was being exactly represented in the music. They felt so perfectly married to each other. And the Odysseus theme, the song called Odysseus he made, I like it. But the rest of the film just felt nondescript for me in terms of sound.
I understand.
Whereas with Sinners, for example, which he also did, everything about the sound is so seductive to me at every second of that film. And then for Interstellar, which is Hans Zimmer that did that one, even though I heard that the reason he didn't do this is because he's not a big fan of trans people, allegedly.
Oh really?
I don't know if it's actually true. Probably Nolan already wanted to go with Ludwig anyway, and people are just connecting the dots. I don't know if it's actually true, but Hans Zimmer's Interstellar score to me brings me to tears every time I listen to it. Like I don't know. It's just everything to me. So this didn't even feel close to that. Then with Oppenheimer, the score is not so much the musicality of it, but like the feeling of like everybody talks about the sound design of Oppenheimer for a reason. The
Yeah.
sound design of Oppenheimer is insane when you're watching it in the cinema. The score is much less exciting to me. At the end of the film, when the credits start rolling, James Blake and Travis Scott start singing. How did you feel about that?
Oh hell no! I was so pissed. I was like, let me hold on, let me walk out of this cinema even faster. Because bear in mind, I didn't love this movie. So yeah, when I realized that, wait, hold on, this is Travis Scott, I was like, no. But very quickly, let me say one thing about Travis Scott. I was thinking, why did he cast Travis Scott? And then I realized that so much of this film is about guilt. And I was like, is that what's going on here? Is this a reference to the Astroworld stuff?
Astroworld tragedy? And I think the number of
Maybe.
people that died in Astroworld is very similar to the number of people that were killed in the Aurora Dark Knight shootings.
It crossed my mind. It crossed my mind.
Is it really that deep? This person also said best adapted screenplay. I mean, he'll probably just get nominated anyway, but like, does it deserve to be? I'm not sure. Best director, he will get nominated. He probably will win if Denis doesn't blow everybody away. Dune 3. I don't know, but if you think about it, we've just talked about the fact that we watched a 3-hour film. And we were entertained thoroughly. In your case, you watched it back to back 2 days. If I had the chance, I'd have watched it the same night, actually, or the day after. A lot of people cannot do that.
Agree. I just think about the role of the director, right? So much of that is limited by resources and stuff like that, right? And if I'm being honest, there are certain films I watched this year that had significantly low budgets, significantly more constraints, less talent, and were far more enjoyable for me. And like, I understand the big draw for this film is the fact that, oh, it's the only film that was completely shot on IMAX, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fair enough, it's a good technical accomplishment, but for me as a cinema goer, as a cinephile, someone who loves film, I can't just award you best director when you created a project of this scale, because you should create a project of this scale.
Yeah, you have infinite resources almost. But yeah, this was a great comment. Just a call out to people, especially when big films are coming. Feel free to like drop it in our comments, your thoughts, if you've already watched it or what you think going in, and we just might unpack them in our next segment. I wanted to talk about the elitism conversation about how this film is being projected around the world. I watched this film on regular IMAX in Lagos, which actually I recently found out is one of the biggest IMAX screens in the world, and it was actually a beautiful experience. I couldn't watch it in 70 millimeters because 70 millimeter screens don't exist in Africa. I know even in the UK, like those tickets were completely sold out for weeks and weeks and weeks. And a lot of people in Asia and other parts of the world also can't access the 70 millimeters. And some people can't access any IMAX theaters. What do you think about this idea that like there's something wrong with pushing for people to watch something that only certain privileged people have access to in the first place?
I have a big problem with it, and it immediately reminded me of One Battle After Another last year. And there was a very similar conversation going on about how, if you're a real Paul Thomas Anderson fan, you need to go and watch it in the intended format. Meanwhile, there's literally only 2 countries that have cinemas that can project in Panavision, and there's only 7 cinemas that can do it. Similarly with IMAX, very few countries have IMAX screens. I think at least a 70 millimeter screens. I think in Europe it's only London, Manchester and Prague, I think. Maybe there's one other European city that has them. And then the rest, like you said, are either regular IMAX or just like a normal cinema screen. Why would you create this film in a format that so few people will ever get to see in the format that you intended? It doesn't really make any sense for me. And I know that all of this is driven by, as I mentioned before, Nolan's own hubris, Nolan's own ego, his own desire to continuously essentially compete with himself. He probably doesn't feel like he's competing with anyone else. And like, he is a very talented director and he should continue to push the bucket because we're all going to watch, best believe. But I just think about all of the people who really love film, who really love Christopher Nolan, and like they are really excited about this film and they simply cannot watch it because of a very, like, it's not a necessary choice to do this. Now, you can make the argument that, of course, to even go to the cinema, you're already quite a privileged person in the grand scheme of things. You can make that claim, fair enough. But I just think, why make it even more elitist? What did you think?
I think I've gone on an evolution on this subject. I had a similar feeling at the beginning. um as a person that like loves film but
Mm.
is in a country where a lot of the infrastructure around film is still quite limited and all controlled by people that don't actually care about films.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, even within that, I'm still somewhat privileged in that I live in the one city in all of West Africa that even has
Mm-hmm.
any kind of IMAX screen. And we actually have a pretty great one. And I got to experience that. And so, yeah, I was like, yeah, this isn't fair. This isn't right. And then, but then I sat down with it and I'm like, you can watch this film in the standard format and have a great time. I've even heard some people say that watching it in standard in Dolby, with Dolby sound, was actually preferential to them to watching it on IMAX.
Mm.
I think there is a bit of propaganda that IMAX is doing, right?
For
That we
sure.
have to be wary of, right? It is in their interest, it is in the exhibitor's interest, it is in the industry controller's interest for us to be chasing this
Mm-hmm.
premium format and spending a premium price on it.
Mm-hmm.
The difference in the quality of your experience watching these films in IMAX versus IMAX 70mm versus just like a good big regular Cineplex, I don't think it's that insane actually. I don't think it's that wildly different. And I also don't think Nolan is a person that doesn't want you to seriously enjoy this film in whatever
Mm-hmm.
format you're watching it. When you look at how they shoot it, the viewfinder, whatever it's called, the camera which through which they can see what the final film is going to look like, has like lines dotted to represent different sizes of frames that this film will eventually be projected in. And they are constantly blocking and framing it with each one in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's like, oh, fuck all of you people that cannot access the only 41 theaters that exist in the world. We'll see how it works out for you. The centering of the framing is actually done for the standard generic
Mm-hmm.
cinema that exists in most of the world. And the IMAX standard format and the IMAX 70mm are just also being framed because there's an understanding that it will also be projected in those ones for like people that have access to it. Nolan doesn't control the actual proprietary technology for IMAX 70mm. And the reason IMAX doesn't really make those anymore is because they overheat, they're expensive, they're hard to maintain, there's lots of problems with it. He's still like a film nerd bro at at his heart. So like the idea of getting to watch a film that was shot on film, projected on film, is just something he liked. The same way Quentin Tarantino, this is how he feels. A lot of these filmmakers tend to be like that because they're just film nerds fundamentally. But I do think when you listen to him talk about what he wants people to experience when they go to watch his film, I actually don't necessarily get an elitism for me that like I don't get snobbery from how he talks about the cinematic experience. I think we are also excited about this film, that the idea of there being steps and of quality of how you could experience it has whipped us all into a bit of a
Mm.
frenzy. And yes, IMAX and Nolan and Universal are leaning into it a bit. But I also think this film nerd culture that has really emerged in the last couple of years is also heavily leaning into it and
Sure.
perpetuating it. I spoke to a lot of people that were literally telling me that if you don't watch it in 70mm, you're basically watching trash. And I'm like,
It's
no,
not that serious.
it's not that serious.
So the
It's
first
not that
time I
serious.
watched it was so I've watched it twice now. First time I watched it was on 70mm Dolby. Second time was on IMAX, but not the 70mm one, basically. I'll admit last year I don't think that like you needed to go to the 7 cinemas that could project Panavision, but I think IMAX does definitely improve the experience. I noticed even a difference when it comes to the colors. I know some people
Yes.
have spoken about like the sound as well. So like I will say if you can watch it in IMAX, definitely do so. But if you can't watch it, you will still have a good experience in the cinema. I do kind of disagree with you though when the credit you're giving to Christopher Nolan, just because I want to highlight again just how difficult it was to film this film. So what I'm saying is like I get what you're saying that he's a film nerd, but like if is him being a film nerd enough to justify literally having to stop your shots every 3 minutes, literally having to hike this big ass thing all the way up the mountain to Ithaca, Like, I don't know if that's enough of a justification. I
It's
suspect that
his
it's rooted in,
hubris.
yeah, it's his hubris and his
Yes.
ego. I think so. And
And
yes,
D, that's why he's going to keep on making these movies, because the next
absolutely.
movie will be him reflecting on the hubris of making the Odyssey, and the next one will be him reflecting on the hubris of making the Odyssey,
Inception.
and the
They're
next one
going
will
on
be
a new
yes,
level again. I
exactly,
can't.
exactly.
Funny. That was a very interesting conversation. Des, what would you give Odyssey out of 10?
I'm going to rewatch it, but right now I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay. So I said that the Odyssey was mid to good. And in that vein, I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. I've bumped it by zero point 0.5 actually in the process of this conversation. And you know what? In all honesty, I just have to be like, I have to answer this with good faith. I watched it twice in one weekend. That's 6 hours of my time in one weekend, and it didn't bore me. So I have to give credit there. It's just that the emotional elements just completely fail for me.
This film is a temporal pincer. It's an inception of Nolan's previous films. This film
Yes.
is an inception about Oppenheimer, about a Tenet, about Interstellar. It is about his own hubris, his own complicated relationship with the beast of the modern blockbuster and the modern superhero epic that he has created. I would even go even further and argue that it's actually about his reflections on the Aurora cinema massacre that happened after The Dark
Mm-hmm.
Knight. It is somewhat repetitive, and yet it is not ready to really grapple with the most beautiful and emotional parts of the text. It is his own thing. I barely think of this film as the Odyssey, but
Mm-hmm.
that thing that it is his own thing, I don't think is without thematic interest. I think how he's handling the concept of war crimes, masculinity, self-flagellation is kind of interesting. The Athena twist kind of works on me. And even though I'd have liked to see a bit more mythology and fantasy, once I realized what this film was doing with what, in my opinion, is a strong atheist message, despite what other people are saying, I kind of went on that journey with it, and I think it mostly executes it. And on a fundamental level, the film is entertaining. I wasn't bored. The time did not bother me. My eyes were glued to the screen. All of the
Mm-hmm.
actors were invested in delivering something to me. Were they all successful? No. But they were all putting something into it that kept me fascinated, and I want to watch it again. So for that reason, the film overall is a success to me,
Mm-hmm.
with reservations.
Yeah, so like you, I think it's basically an atheist agnostic retelling of the Odyssey. In many ways, that is a downgrade from the poem for me because my favorite part about the poem actually is the god. So that was kind of disappointing. But there are positives. I would say the positives of the film are that it's a very ambitious project. Again, it's not really just the Odyssey. Nolan has also incorporated elements from the Iliad, from the Aeneid, and also retellings. For example, with Circe's segment, and I thought that was really, really ambitious and generally well done. Nolan is also making a very bold move to basically use a beloved epic hero to critique masculinity and war. It's not easy for someone to do this, and I think he's generally done a very good job at the core message he's selling. Like you, I didn't notice the time, watched it back to back in one week, and I didn't have any issues. The colors were way better than I expected, especially when I watched it in IMAX. So that was nice for me to see. I love seeing the beautiful blue Mediterranean Sea and the luscious greens of Scotland.
To the point that I was wondering if Nolan wasn't done dirty with the trailers, because I think the trailers
Yeah,
significantly
I was
undersell just
worried.
how beautiful the colors of this film are.
And even things like Penelope's dress, beautiful blue, and even like inside of Odysseus' palace, I guess, beautiful colors of what is actually quite an accurate depiction of ancient Greek palaces. So that was really well done for me. I particularly enjoyed the horror aspects of this film, notably the Cyclops and Circe's Island. And also, I want to give some credit to Nolan for the good things he does regarding the women, such as he very quickly reframes Clytemnestra's infidelity in a way that the poem doesn't, and he also reframed Cersei's hatred for men in a way that feels very contemporary and was very, very moving to me. And then, unfortunately, I have to address the negatives because, again, to me, the film is overall mid with good elements. So I didn't feel immersed in this film, and it's because there's a lack of a consistent visual messaging, and most importantly, the film lacks an emotional anchor. Because of Nolan's changes to the narrative, we don't actually understand what's motivating Odysseus, and so I basically check out of his journey in general. And then unfortunately, when he does do the reunification in the end, Tom Holland absolutely ruins it for the audience, so it doesn't quite work for me. And then, and then the things that don't work for me when it comes to the women are really important. Basically, his Achilles heel strikes again, and I don't know how he manages to make the
Is
women
that
from a three
was that a
thousand year old.
pun?
Yes, it is a pun.
Okay.
I don't understand how he manages to make the women from a 3,000-year-old poem even less interesting in his modern day film. It doesn't make any damn sense. And perhaps one of the biggest issues I have with the film is the way how it whitewashes Odysseus. I don't like the Odyssey because of Odysseus, but at least he's a very complicated man. Literally, line one of Emily Wilson's translation is, "Let me tell you about a complicated man." And all we get in the film is a whitewashed Matt Damon playing a superhero. And
Not too much.
we don't see any hubris. We don't see the desire for glory. And I understand that he's making critiques ultimately about masculinity, but I think I would have rathered if we actually went on the hero's journey with Odysseus, as opposed to the film telling me again and again that Odysseus is different. He's different from Agamemnon. He's different from his crew in a way that just doesn't feel justified for me. And then finally, there are some performances that really just it just ruins the film for me, notably by John Bernthal and Tom Holland. So yeah, overall, I can only say that the film is mid. It's not a bad watch though. Please go and watch it if you're interested. And also to everyone who watched the film and loved it, please, 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 if you can, read the Odyssey, but also read the Iliad. I think you might actually enjoy it. And there's so much to read out there about like retellings and different ways to interpret the poem. So if anything, the positive from this film is that hopefully people will be engaging with the classics more, and that's a positive note, right?
Yeah. I also wanted to give a special shout out that I think Samantha Morton has gotten a lot of praise, but I generally think Elliot Page nails an emotional tone in this film that is
Mm-hmm.
tricky with the different things that are being wrestled with thematically here. And I think it was actually quite beautifully done. And I even think the casting of Elliot specifically in that role by Nolan is an intentional choice that I actually think pays off. I thought Travis Scott was actually quite good, and I enjoyed the first few seconds of this film when he appears. I thought Lupita was undeserved, and I would have actually preferred for her role to have been swapped with Zendaya or Charlize Theron's roles,
Mm-hmm.
because I think she would have eaten up those roles better, even though there might have also been some messy optics with associating her with any of those roles as well.